Chapter 465. In the middle of the air, a moment ago, that General Manager Su was hesitant and full of confidence as he started to think about how to defeat this spiritual beast. In the next moment, 3 beams of green light shot out of thin air, locking down all of his life force. The opponents Qin Wushuang had met before had reacted before the graceful spiritual bow was activated. They did not have the time to evade. This time, General Manager Su's reaction was after the graceful spiritual bow had been activated. How could there be any luck? For these 3 arrows, regardless of the angle or power, they were perfect. At least to Qin Wushuang, who was at the peak of the perfect stage, these were his most successful and most powerful 3 arrows since he had the graceful spiritual bow. The 3 green lights were tyrannical and direct. The powerful flowing lights broke through all the aura surrounding General Manager Su and shattered all his protective aura into pieces. The flowing green lights rushed into General Manager Su's body quickly. In an instant, the green light tore apart General Manager Su's body and tore it into countless pieces that filled the sky. Before he could even let out a miserable cry, General Manager Su, who had been unparalleled in the world a moment ago, was shot into pieces by this tyrannical chain of arrows. And his blue and white long sword that had been emitting dazzling blue and white lights a moment ago, instantly lost its color after being hit by the green lights. It fell from the sky and fell to the ground. GMO was overjoyed. He grabbed the blue and white sword and laughed. "Boss, can you give me this sword as a reward?" Qin Wushuang was greatly energized after he had killed General Manager Su. He called out to Lone, "Warren Third, let him come this way." Receiving the order, the purple flame electric beast gave 3 light whistles to the sky. The interval between these 3 whistles was short and it was the signal to call for his friend. Currently, Bao Bao was playing hide and seek with that Dong Xiong. Hearing the warning from the purple flame electric beast, he was overjoyed inwardly. He knew that Qin Wushuang had succeeded. With a roaring laugh, he crawled out from the deep ley lines and made a face at Dong Xiong. "If you have the guts, come after me." Dong Xiong was not a fool. Although he did not see the specific situation of the battle just now, he felt a powerful aura erupt. Then, he tried to communicate with his divine sense, but he could not sense the aura of his companions. Dong Xiong's whole body was covered in cold sweat. He had a vague feeling that the situation was not good. After chasing Bao Bao for such a long time, he already felt somewhat uneasy. The sudden disappearance of his companion's aura made everything seem even stranger. At this time, when he heard Bao Bao's tone of luring him to chase after him, how could he chase after him? His body swayed in the air, and his sword aura soared into the sky. He then turned around and flew away. "Looks like these 3 fellows are really Qin Wushuang's group." Before Dong Xiong could fly far, a sharp whistle came from the Divine Finger Mountain. Then, 3 figures with unparalleled speed appeared in front of him and blocked him in mid-air. "Flying in the air of my Divine Finger Mountain? Stay! Get down!" 3 sword lights rushed towards Dong Xiong. These sword lights were not a joke. Each of them was filled with tyrannical murderous intent and did not allow him to hesitate. Although Dong Xiong was an elite warrior at the transformation void martial stage, he did not dare to act rashly in the territory of the primary central sect. He did not have the courage to fight against 3 people at the same time. He lowered his body and dropped to the ground. Initially, these 3 people had planned to force him down with their swords. When they saw Dong Xiong's body drop, they also dropped down after him. At this moment, Bao Bao had already met up with Qin Wushuang. When they saw Dong Xiong being forced down by 3 waves of sword qi, they knew that more people had appeared out of nowhere. They nodded at each other and ran outside. "Don't go." From the forest ahead, a boomerang-like weapon spiraled out. In a flash, it blocked the path of Qin Wushuang. Next, a dozen figures also jumped out from the forest. Each of them were dressed in the same attire. Apparently, they were from the same sect. At this time, Dong Xiong was also forced down by those 3 elite warriors. He also dropped to the grassland on the side. At this time, the 3 groups of people all had different standpoints. Instantly, the situation appeared extremely strange. Inwardly, Dong Xiong kept whispering. He was even more nervous than Qin Wushuang. It was because he knew clearly that as a martial artist of the dark green cloud Taoist sect, he would not have a good time if he was stopped by people of the primary central sect near the Divine Finger Mountain. Fortunately, he was only dressed in ordinary attire, and was not wearing the attire of the dark green cloud Taoist sect. Or else, most likely he would have been attacked from all sides. Now, he could only hope that these people of the primary central sect did not recognize him and he could get away with it. For the primary central sect, the leader was the one who had used the boomerang to stop Qin Wushuang. He appeared to be in his 30s and appeared to be extremely astute with a pair of sharp eyes. This person was an elder of the primary central sect named Han Qing. Before this Han Qing had spoken, the expression of his 2 subordinates changed slightly when they saw Dong Xiong. They whispered a few words next to Han Qing's ear. As soon as Dong Xiong saw this situation, he knew that trouble had come. Since Dong Xiong lived in the orderly mountain prefecture, many people did not know that he was a disciple of the dark green cloud Taoist sect. However, the primary central sect and the dark green cloud Taoist sect had never dealt with each other. Being hostile powerhouses, they were adept at digging into each other's root. Therefore, it was not strange for Dong Xiong to be recognized by the primary central sect. After Han Qing had finished listening to his subordinates, he laughed with interest. He sized Dong Xiong up with a strange look and said with a smile, "Truly strange, very strange." Dong Xiong braced himself and walked forward. "Friend, please listen to me." Han Qing sneered. "People of the dark green cloud Taoist sect are calling people of the primary central sect your friends? Don't you find this form of address amusing?" Dong Xiong's expression turned pale as he took a few steps back. Suddenly, a strange light flashed across his eyes as he cried out, "Mister, today I did come somewhat recklessly. However, I did not trespass into the forbidden area of the primary central sect, right? Currently, the 5 mountain peaks of the Divine Finger Mountain are all forbidden areas of the primary central sect," Han Qing said confidently. When one was under the eaves, how could one not lower one's head? Dong Xiong knew that today, at the territory of the primary central sect, he did not have the final say. He could only think of a way to leave. "Okay, it's my fault. But, okay, it's good that you admit that you are not sensible. After taking you down, we will go to the dark green cloud Taoist sect to ask your honored Tao warrior for his lack of discipline." Han Qing waved his hand and the 3 elite warriors of the primary central sect that followed behind Dong Xiong surrounded him. Dong Xiong did not dare to resist as he raised both of his hands and cried out, "Mister, how about listening to me?" Seeing that he wanted to speak a few times, Han Qing made a hand gesture with a cold sneer. He stared at Dong Xiong. "If you want to speak, first explain your background." Dong Xiong knew his own situation and could not refuse as he said, "My name is Dong Xiong, and I am indeed someone of the dark green cloud Taoist sect. However, I have not come here today to provoke the primary central sect, nor do I intend to become enemies with the primary central sect. Mister, for today's matter, I was also urged to come here by a friend. Now that I have fallen into this situation, I only wish to escape unscathed. I will tell you a great secret." Han Qing raised his head and laughed. Yet, his tone was full of disdain. "A great secret? Even if you have a great secret, I will take you down first. As long as you fall into the hands of the primary central sect, even if it is a great secret, I am not afraid that you will not speak." Han Qing's tone was cold and apparently, there was no room for negotiation. Inwardly, Dong Xiong complained incessantly as his expression kept changing. He said viciously, "Mister, don't push me too far. I would rather be killed than humiliated. Don't even think about taking me back to humiliate me. Don't even think about it? Han Qing laughed coldly and shouted, That's what I thought. Take him down. As soon as the words, take him down, left his mouth, the three people next to Dong Xiong immediately surrounded him in a triangle formation. 3 streaks of sword light came at Dong Xiong from different directions. Each of these 3 sword lights had their own characteristic. Clearly, they were not ordinary people. Just by seeing how they were able to ride in the air, he knew that these 3 were elite warriors at the transformation void martial stage. And these 3 elite warriors at the transformation void martial stage listened to someone else. It was apparent that the person who had spoken to him before was even more powerful. As soon as he thought of this, Dong Xiong's heart was filled with fear. However, fear was fear. At this time, since there was no way out, he could only fight to the death. Fight to the death and fight to survive. Fight to the death with the method of fighting to the death. At the same time that Dong Xiong was complaining incessantly in his heart, he also made up his mind to die. Grabbing with his palm, a red flame burned from his palm. Pushing with both hands, this flame instantly burned and spread out towards the surroundings. This fire was like a raging ferocious beast that was spewing out from the ground. Almost at the same time, Dong Xiong's body also rushed out and the large saber in his hand swept horizontally. The murderous saber light was like the momentum of the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves as it cut towards the waist of the person in the south. This saber strike was not a life or death struggle, but it was more like a life or death struggle. Almost at this moment, Han Qing lightly raised his arm. An invisible force urged the boomerang in his hand. With a whoosh, like a shooting star catching up with the moon, it directly wrapped around the edge of the saber. Clank! The crisp sound of metal colliding caused Dong Xiong to feel a burst of dryness in his mouth and tongue. The other party's boomerang seemed to be tied by an invisible rope and was a soft weapon. However, when such a soft weapon clashed with his murderous saber, it made the web between his thumb and index finger feel numb. When an expert made a move, one would know whether they were skilled or not. Especially in a battle between elite warriors, the difference between one level higher and one level lower was real. Dong Xiong's momentary shock had brought about a chain reaction that would consign him to eternal damnation. The instant when Dong Xiong's weapon was entangled, Qin Wushuang and the other 2 rushed out under the lead of Bao Bao's earth elemental technique. This was their only chance. On the side of the primary central sect, only Han Qing and those 3 elite warriors at the transformation void martial stage had the power to stop Qin Wushuang. However, at this instant, all of their attention was placed on Dong Xiong. Only this momentary opportunity had allowed Qin Wushuang and the others to rush out a few dozen miles. At this moment, of course, Qin Wushuang would not be stingy with his equipment as he activated another spiritual talisman. This spiritual talisman was not the Earth Elemental Talisman, but an ordinary Earth Elemental Talisman. Combined with Bao Bao's Earth Elemental technique, this spiritual talisman had the effect of increasing the spiritual qi. For a time, their speed had been raised to the extreme. The sprint of these 3 people was extraordinarily smooth. After traveling for thousands of miles, they finally came out from the ground and changed back to their initial appearance when they had entered the Xian Yuan Mound. Now that General Manager Su was dead, of course, they were not afraid of the eye possession technique. However, the people of the primary central sect did not know about their disguise. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com, support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 466. To the Xian Yuan Mound, 1,000 miles of distance was only a short distance. However, with this 1,000 miles of distance, many variables could exist. After all, within the 1,000 miles, there were many escape routes. Even if the other party wanted to chase them, they would not be able to chase in their direction accurately. Most importantly, the primary central sect was not the heavenly Luo Taoist sect. Even if they knew the identity of Qin Wushuang, they would not chase after them regardless of the cost. Not to mention, the primary central sect might not have learned their identity from Dong Xiong. This is strange. How come trouble keeps coming one after another? Bao Bao panted with exhaustion. This is exciting. Lone was rather straightforward. Ha ha, whenever I think about how Boss shot that Su guy to death, it's so satisfying. Apparently, Lone was still reminiscing about that battle. That Dong Xiong and that Su guy are on the same side. Now, he will suffer. Ha ha, it seems that the dark green cloud Taoist sect and the primary central sect are not on good terms. If it weren't for the conflict between them, it would have been troublesome for us to escape today. I am afraid that leader of the primary central sect is not much weaker than that Chen Senior. Bao Bao also felt deeply moved when he thought about Elder Han Qing of the primary central sect. He must admit that if that Dong Xiong had not taken the blame, it would have been extremely troublesome for them to escape from the primary central sect. At the Divine Finger Mountain, Han Qing restrained Dong Xiong with one move. Just when he was about to make a vicious move, he realized that Qin Wushuang had escaped. His expression changed and he glared at his subordinate. Apparently, he was somewhat dissatisfied. With so many people present, they had let them escape. Seeing this opportunity, Dong Xiong cried out, "Mister, I already said that I have important information to share. Now that those 3 guys have escaped, it's the same as a great fortuitous opportunity, running away." Humph. Inwardly, Han Qing also felt somewhat regretful. Of course, he would not admit it. He waved his hand. "Take this guy back to the primary central sect." Dong Xiong immediately said, "Mister, why are you so stubborn? It's not too late to let me go. If those 3 guys had escaped, I promise that you will regret it for the rest of your life." Han Qing gestured for the people escorting Dong Xiong to stop. Some blush emerged on Dong Xiong's pale face. Apparently, he knew that the other party was truly moved this time. At the moment, he struck while the iron was hot and said, "Mister, I swear in the name of the dark green cloud Taoist sect, if I speak half a word of lies, may the heavens strike me down." Han Qing frowned and said, "What kind of secret is it? Tell me. If you really are valuable, it won't be difficult for me to let you go." However, Dong Xiong shook his head. His attitude was very firm. "If I say it, it's equivalent to cutting off my own path of survival. You know this better than I do. Your Excellency, if you really are sincere, you should propose a solution that both sides can accept. As long as I ensure your safety, you will be able to obtain this confidential information." Han Qing rolled his eyes. "Then tell me, what kind of solution can you accept?" Dong Xiong thought for a moment and said, "It's simple. As long as we return to the orderly mountain capital city, I will tell you this news. As for whether you can get it or not, that will depend on your own abilities." Han Qing vetoed, "That's impossible. When we are at your orderly mountain prefecture territory, it would be strange if you were willing to cooperate." "Then what do you suggest?" Han Qing said, "At most, we can only send you to the city gate of the orderly mountain prefecture capital city. If you are still worried, you can inform your fellow disciples to pick you up." Dong Xiong thought for a moment. "All right, I will take a step back." However, Han Qing's subordinate advised him, "Elder Han, I am afraid this guy wants to escape death and deliberately said these words to confuse us. You must not believe him so easily." Of course, Han Qing had his own reasons. Initially, he also felt that Dong Xiong had such motive. However, when Qin Wushuang and his group took the opportunity to escape, it gave him other ideas. Think about it, if those 3 did not have a guilty conscience, why would they disregard their lives to escape? Thus, he believed 70% of Dong Xiong's words. With 70% certainty, he was willing to take the risk. Ajua, go to the orderly mountain prefecture first. Inform his family to pick him up outside the city gate. Remember, you must control the time and be one step ahead of us. We must not give them too much time to ask the local tyrant of the dark green cloud Taoist sect to deal with us. One of the subordinates accepted the order. Yes, Elder Han. Initially, Dong Xiong had some devious thoughts as he wanted to use this method to attract his fellow disciples to rescue him. Hearing Han Qing's words, he knew that his wishful thinking would not work. Inwardly, he could not help but feel somewhat frustrated. However, seeing Han Qing's arrangement, he did show some sincerity in making a deal. At the moment, he said, "Of course you cannot go to my house. I will give you a token. You only need to go to the old soup pawn shop on Oak Street of the orderly mountain capital city and give the token to anyone in the pawn shop to explain the situation." Dong Xiong was not someone to be trifled with. Of course, he must be on guard against people of the primary central sect. Both parties were not easy to deal with. No one could gain any advantage. On the contrary, it would facilitate this deal. Indeed, everything was going smoothly. When Dong Xiong and his group arrived outside the orderly mountain capital city, a Zhua had also arrived with his people. Although Dong Xiong was frustrated, he was calm. He had nothing to feel ashamed about losing before so many elite warriors of the primary central sect. Ahead is the orderly mountain capital city, right? Han Qing asked lightly. Although his tone was calm, it carried a different kind of majesty. Whether you live or die, it's all up to you. If you play tricks on me now or give me false information, I can still take your life at this moment. Even if your dark green cloud Taoist sect wants to take revenge, it will be in the future. Facing such threat, Dong Xiong was extremely calm. Sweeping away his previous dejected state, he smiled lightly and did not evade his gaze. He looked at Han Qing and said, "Since I have made an oath, of course I will not deceive you with lies. Of those 3 people that escaped, one of them is Qin Wushuang from the human countries. Elder Han should not be unfamiliar with this name, right? Qin Wushuang?" Instantly, a stunned expression appeared on Han Qing's face. Then, a trace of regret flashed across his face. "Are you speaking the truth? If I am lying, let me die with 10,000 arrows piercing through my heart." At this moment, Dong Xiong had nothing to hide. Han Qing's expression was uncertain. Inwardly, he was filled with endless regret. Qin Wushuang, the bounty issued by the heavenly Luo Taoist sect had caused an uproar. Not only had the orderly mountain prefecture become lively, the news had also spread to every corner of the neighboring Judge Mountain Prefecture. The strongest sect of the Judge Mountain Prefecture was the primary central sect of the Divine Finger Mountain. This primary central sect possessed a powerful intelligence network. After they had learned about Qin Wushuang, they immediately knew the value of Qin Wushuang. Naturally, their target had locked onto Qin Wushuang's graceful spiritual bow. After all, to the sects between the third and second rate in the Xian Yuan Mound, the temptation of a legendary divine weapon was fatal. Once the rumor turned out to be true and it was truly a divine weapon, the sect that had acquired this divine weapon could almost become a carp leaping over the Dragon Gate. Not to mention becoming a first-rate sect, they could definitely look down on any second-rate sect. For your information, even those second-rate sects would not dare to claim to possess a divine weapon. To a large extent, the reason why the Heavenly Emperor Eight Gates could occupy the position of the Heavenly Emperor Eight Gates and not be replaced by others was because they possessed a divine weapon and elite warriors that could unleash the power of the divine weapon. Of course, besides the Heavenly Emperor Eight Gates, there were a few other powerful powerhouses in the Xian Yuan Mound. It was not to say that besides the Heavenly Emperor Eight Gates, the other powerhouses would not have a divine weapon. However, with a divine weapon, one would not necessarily be able to enter the Heavenly Emperor Eight Gate. However, at least, with a divine weapon, It meant that one would have the opportunity to strive for the throne of the Heavenly Emperor Mountain. To any sect in the Xian Yuan Mound, this was a great temptation. For your information, by entering the Heavenly Emperor 8 gates, it meant one would be qualified to compete for the Heavenly Emperor seat. Once they had acquired the seat, this sect would shake the world and rule the Xian Yuan Mound. Indeed, they would be second only to one and above tens of thousands. Since the higher-ups of the primary central sect had given the order, being the elder of the primary central sect, Han Qing was also one of the higher-up. Naturally, he knew what this Qin Wushuang meant. However, Han Qing never thought that because of his carelessness and mistake, Qin Wushuang had slipped away from under their eyes. When he thought here, Han Qing's voice became even colder. Qin Wushuang. How do you know he is Qin Wushuang? It's a long story. If you want to talk about it, I will have to start from my friend. Dong Xiong did not hide the truth and explained in full detail how General Manager Su had found him and how he had participated in the battle to besiege the 100-leaf Qin clan. Han Qing's face turned purple as he listened. Apparently, after hearing these words, he was even more convinced that Dong Xiong was speaking the truth. At the moment, how could the word regret describe his current mood? Elder Han, I have said everything I need to say. Dong Xiong reminded him. Han Qing gave a long sigh and waved his hand. Let him go. Finally, those 3 elite warriors that had escorted Dong Xiong had loosened their bindings. Han Qing waved his hand. Let's go. Dong Xiong let out a long sigh of relief as his forehead was full of sweat. Thank the heavens, at least he managed to get his life back. It's all right, you guys can go back. Dong Xiong waved his hand and ignored those people that had come to pick him up. Alone, he dashed towards the city. He also knew that since Qin Wushuang and his friends had left the orderly mountain prefecture, his hope of chasing after Qin Wushuang had been completely shattered. At this moment, he only had one thought, and that was to turn this information into a vested interest. When he thought here, Dong Xiong sped up his footstep. This time, his target was the mansion of the city lord. Currently, Xie Sankai was talking with Mu Rong Qianji inside the mansion. When he heard that Dong Xiong had come to visit, he waved his hand impatiently. No, this guy is not tactful. Naturally, this comment meant that although Dong Xiong was a disciple of the Dark Green Cloud Taoist sect, his status was far inferior to Xie Sankai's. He was not qualified to see him alone. However, that subordinate said, that guy with the surname Dong said that he has important news to tell Lord Mu Rong. He said that you will regret not seeing him. Inwardly, Mu Rong Qianji was shocked as he said with a smile, Lord, why don't you let him come in and speak? To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 467. Since Mu Rong Qianji had spoken, of course, Xie Sankai would not say half a word of no. He smiled apologetically, then let him come in and say a few words. However, this person is extremely cunning, and we must guard against him. Mu Rong Qianji did not speak and only smiled lightly. What kind of joke was this? With Mu Rong Qianji's eyesight, ordinary people would not have the courage to lie with their eyes open. In a moment, Dong Xiong was brought in by the palace lord. This Dong Xiong was a clever person. Although he was not as suspicious as General Manager Su, he was more calculative and scheming than General Manager Su. He bowed respectfully and stood to the side obediently. He was not in a rush to speak. He knew that this was the mansion of the palace lord. Since the palace lord had not spoken, it was not his turn to speak. Xie Sankai sized Dong Xiong up with a scrutinizing gaze. Butler Dong of the Dark Green Cloud Taoist sect, right? Dong Xiong smiled apologetically. That's me. It's rare that the palace lord has heard of my name. Xie Sankai was the palace lord. Regardless of personal strength or position, he was not inferior to the honored Taoist of the dark green cloud Taoist sect. Before Dong Xiong, of course, he was qualified to put on airs. Dong Xiong was also well aware of this point. Thus, his tone was extremely respectful. Xie Sankai did not answer and drank a mouthful of tea. Then, he said in a neither fast nor slow manner, "Do you have any urgent matters to report to my mansion?" Inwardly, Xie Sankai was somewhat annoyed by this Dong Xiong. After all, Dong Xiong had said that he would regret not seeing him. This made Xie Sankai feel that he had lost face before Mu Rong Qianji. Hearing Xie Sankai's question, Dong Xiong said with a smile, "I heard that the honorable guest at your mansion had issued a bounty mission. Recently I heard some rumors. I am here to report." When Xie Sankai heard these words, he could not help but look at Mu Rong Qianji. Mu Rong Qianji frowned lightly. "What news, please speak?" Dong Xiong immediately said, "Recently, I received information that Qin Wushuang and his two subordinates had disguised themselves as three brothers to wander the Xian Yuan Mound. They had used the name Wu Xinghe. This person had also participated in the battle with the 100-leaf Qin clan. Together with the Qin clan, they had destroyed the group of freelance martial artists that had invaded. This person appeared in the orderly mountain capital 2 days ago." Wu Xinghe. Mu Rong Qianji chewed on this name. "Yes, 2 nights ago. It's highly possible that he was at the Freelance Martial Artist Union and heard everyone discussing the assassination order from the Heavenly Luo Taoist sect." Xie Sankai laughed. "Dong Xiong, do you have any basis for your words?" "To tell you the truth, Lord Manorhead, this information came from a friend of mine. He participated in Chen Sen's battle. Moreover, he was the one who invited me to hunt down these 3 people. At first, I thought he was only hunting down his enemies. However, he did not expect that the person he was chasing was actually Qin Wushuang. This Qin Wushuang had used the alias of Wu Xinghe to infiltrate his team. Unfortunately, my friend was killed. He only told me this shocking news on his deathbed. As soon as I heard the news, I rushed here immediately. This way, you are quite sensible." It was unknown whether Xie Sankai was praising him or mocking him. However, Dong Xiong showed an extremely terrified expression as he lowered his body and answered, "You are overpraising me, I only feel—" Naturally, Mu Rong Qianji was not in the mood to listen to him expressing his loyalty as he asked, "Then where is this Wu Xinghe now?" "He is heading north. I guess his route should be to the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan." A complicated expression emerged from Mu Rong Qianji's eyes. After a moment, he nodded. "Okay." He turned around and said to Xie Sankai, "Manorhead, I will leave 100,000 gold crystal stones in your hands. If the information is true, I will write a letter to inform you. By that time, please give this reward to this person." Xie Sankai laughed. "How could I need you to give me the money? This Xie will naturally pay for it on behalf of Lord Murong. Please don't decline. I have troubled you during this time. If I have time in the future, I will come again to express my gratitude. If you have time, you are also welcome to visit the floating snow house." Mu Rong Qianji's courteous words made Xie Sankai feel extremely comfortable. Of course. If I can visit the floating snow house in my lifetime, I would not have wasted my time in this world. At this moment, before Qin Wushuang's group of 3, there was an endless mountain range. When Qin Wushuang looked at the map, he knew that besides the Divine Finger Mountain, this was the most majestic crest mountain of the Judge Mountain. Since the terrain of this crest mountain was not as good as the Divine Finger Mountain, it was not occupied by sections. Because of this crest mountain was a famous place for freelance martial artists of the Judge Mountain Prefecture. This crest mountain also contained all kinds of beautiful legends. Historically, the different legends of the crest mountain almost carried the color of myth. With these beautiful legends, a sect should have established itself at this crest mountain. However, the only imperfection was that this crest mountain was a volcano and an active one. It would often erupt. To martial artists, the eruption of a volcano would not threaten their lives. However, to a sect, it was not reliable to establish a foundation at such a place. It could be destroyed at any time. Thus, this crest mountain was an undeveloped Pure Land. Third. This crest mountain is about 10,000 miles away from the Divine Finger Mountain. I plan to rest here for a while. Bao Bao was a thoughtful person as he revealed a surprised expression. Boss, are you going to break through? Qin Wushuang nodded. After the battle with that general manager Su, I felt that I had triggered some mysterious heavenly secrets. The signal from my body is becoming more obvious. For this breakthrough, the signal from my body is extremely active and obvious. It's completely different than before. Bao Bao and Lone were overjoyed. Since they had experienced such changes, of course, they knew that this was the sign of the spiritual martial force advancing to the void martial force. This type of advancement was not a climb within the same stage, but a breakthrough across the stage. This advancement was equivalent to a complete increase in the stage and a complete transformation. Thus, it was reasonable for their body to react violently. Boss, congratulations, this way, you are truly entering the ranks of the void martial force. Haha, this is great news. In the future, all three of us will be at the refined void martial stage. Even if we encounter a profound void martial stage, with your equipment and talent, you should be able to fight them, right? Third brother, we have to hurry up. Don't drag boss down. The purple flame electric beast was also abnormally excited as he said to Bao Bao. Bao Bao was radiant with joy. Yes, boss, when you enter the refined void martial stage, Second and I combined might not be able to beat you. Lone chuckled. Are you stupid? Why would boss beat us for no reason? Currently, Qin Wushuang was feeling extremely calm inwardly. Ever since he had stepped onto the path of martial arts, he had come this far. Of course, the biggest surprise was when he had suddenly discovered that he had entered the upper sky spiritual martial force. After that surprise, each time Qin Wushuang made a breakthrough, he became more calm and collected than the previous one. Currently, although he was advancing across the stage, he had controlled his mood well. Without a doubt, he would be invincible at the void martial stage if placed in the human countries. However, he had already entered the giant stage of the Xian Yuan Mound. To him, entering the void martial stage was only the beginning. The challenges he would face in the future would not be something a refined void martial stage martial artist could handle. What he needed to do was not to be arrogant, but to walk forward step by step. While they were talking, suddenly, Lone remembered something and took out an object from his bosom. Indeed, it was a storage ring. Boss, I almost forgot. This dropped from that general manager Su's body after you killed him. It's a storage ring. Bao Bao's eyes turned green as he urged, open it and see. In the end, this general manager Su was only a freelance martial artist. Only, he was a relatively strong freelance martial artist. Inside this storage ring, it was not as abundant as Qin Wushuang had imagined. Besides crystal stones, there were 4 spiritual talismans and a secret book. This secret book had 3 words written on it, Pupil Attachment Technique. Holding it in his hand, Qin Wushuang could not help but feel an itch in his heart as he flipped open this secret book. After flipping a few pages, Qin Wushuang was amazed. He was an expert in martial arts. Of course, he could see that this pupil attachment technique was not a bluff. It truly existed. The basic principle of this technique was to train both eyes and use the natural attributes of the light to form a form of mystical focus. From there, it would leave an invisible mark on the enemy's body. This was all the profoundness of the entire pupil attachment technique. The minimum requirement to train the pupil attachment technique was to be at the void martial stage. Only at the void martial stage could one transform the pupil technique into nothingness and merge with the void to leave an invisible mark on the enemy's body. In other words, at the spiritual martial force, even if one was at the perfect stage, they were not qualified to train this pupil attachment technique. Boss, for this I want to train. Bao Bao was the first one to shout. Lone did not dare to fall behind. I also want a share. Qin Wushuang said with a smile. Everyone gets a share. It's not a bad thing to have one more skill. Bao Bao laughed. That's right, boss. Let's train at this crest mountain for a while. You should try to break through as soon as possible. The two of us will protect you and train this pupil attachment technique. At the same time, how about it? I was planning to do that. Qin Wushuang said with a smile. For this storage ring, which one of you two wants it? Bao Bao said obediently. Of course we will distribute it according to the order. This time, it will go to second. Next time, it will go to me. How about it? Hearing his words, Lone felt embarrassed. Third, are you going easy on me? Qin Wushuang said with a smile. Then let's distribute it this way. In terms of scale, this crest mountain was almost on par with the Divine Finger Mountain. In terms of depth, it was even more profound than the Divine Finger Mountain. Although Qin Wushuang and his friends had extraordinary skills, they would not dare to neglect at this crest mountain. They explored step by step and made sure there were no hidden threat. Then, they chose an extremely secluded place to be Qin Wushuang's place for solitary training. However, this time, Qin Wushuang did not plan to seek a breakthrough through solitary training. During this time, as Qin Wushuang traveled thousands of miles, he had been thinking about the stages of his training. Unconsciously, during this journey, Qin Wushuang could feel that his stage kept increasing. It was almost a process where success was achieved when the conditions were right and the cup was full. This time, not only was Qin Wushuang going to achieve a breakthrough in his stage, he also planned to achieve a major breakthrough in his knowledge of martial arts. Today's third update is over. Let's promote the group. VIP2 Group, Star Luo, 128618757, requires full subscription, verification to enter the group. VIP3 Group, Xian Yuan, 128063993, can be added to Qidian VIP users. Normal User 4 Group, 132424122, can be added to anyone who supports Xinghe. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.qidian.com. More chapters, support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 468. Just as Qin Wushuang and his group were training at the Crest Mountain, a man in black entered one of the courtyards of the heavenly Luo Daoist sect at a fast speed. He stopped before a small bamboo forest and blew 3 whistles that sounded as crisp as the chirping of an oriole. In a moment, a wave of footsteps emerged from the bamboo forest as a young man walked out. This person had a handsome appearance. Only, his nose was high and his eye sockets were deep. Between his moving eyes, it gave people a sharp feeling. Black Panther, is there any latest news? This young man asked lightly. Young master, there is a lot of news from the Orderly Mountain Prefecture. Apparently, this man in black was this young man's trusted subordinate. I hope to hear the information I need. Young master, at least 3 things you are concerned about. Black Panther bowed and said, Tell me one at a time. Be careful, don't leave anything out. Black Panther nodded and also started to move. He followed behind that young man and walked into the bamboo forest. This bamboo forest appeared simple. In fact, it concealed a formation and contained other mysteries. Even if you shout at the top of your lungs, no one from the outside will hear the conversation inside this bamboo forest. This young man said lightly, Young master, the first matter is related to that Qin Wushuang. Black Panther said with a solemn expression. While he spoke, he observed the reaction of that young man with his eyes. Indeed, when he heard the 3 words Qin Wushuang, a strange color shot out from the deep eyes of this young man. He nodded lightly. What about that Qin Wushuang? According to the information, he has already infiltrated the Xian Yuan Mound. And according to the rumors, this person is most likely related to the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan. Heavenly Emperor Qin clan? Apparently, that young man was stunned. Have you ever heard that the Heavenly Emperor Mountain has a branch in the human countries? I have never heard of it. However, the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan has occupied the Heavenly Emperor Mountain for thousands of years. They have tens of thousands of disciples. It would not be unreasonable to say that they have a branch in the human countries. That young man nodded and asked again after a moment of silence. That Qin Wushuang has entered the Xian Yuan Mound? Is this information reliable? It should be very reliable. The person who spread this news was a freelance martial artist of the Orderly Mountain Prefecture who specialized in selling information. And the person who interrogated him was Mu Rong Qianji. Under the pressure of the floating snow house's housemaster, the rogue cultivator didn't dare to lie, nor did he have the ability to do so. He said that he had obtained the information from the Red Maple Human clan at the Dispersed Praying Mountain. Before Qin Wushuang had entered the Xian Yuan Mound, his last activity was at the Dispersed Praying Mountain. And the activity he had engaged in was to deal with the Red Maple Human clan. Therefore, this information is highly reliable. Isn't it perfect to enter the Xian Yuan Mound? The smile on the young man's face was somewhat wanton as he said in a gloomy tone, Did anyone take up the level 2 kill order? Young master, since ancient times, there have been many rogue cultivators who have sold their lives for money. Once the level 2 kill order was issued, it naturally attracted a lot of followers. But the problem was that these rogue cultivators were very blind. So far, there was no news about Qin Wushuang at all. In my opinion, those rogue cultivators may not be able to solve the problem. With a solemn expression, that young man nodded lightly as if he was thinking deeply about something. After a while, he asked again, Then what about the second matter? I already mentioned the second matter earlier. Mu Rong Qianji of the Floating Snow House has already arrived at the Orderly Mountain Prefecture. I can see that this Mu Rong Qianji is indeed searching for his precious daughter. Mu Rong Qianji. That young man mulled over this name. He is putting on a show for us. Young master, it's not something new that Mu Rong Qianji has arrived at the Orderly Mountain Prefecture. What's new is that he has also issued a 100,000 bounty to search for clues related to Qin Wushuang. Black Panther's words made this young man twist his brow instantly. He took a deep breath and asked seriously, He also issued a bounty and a 100,000? Yes. However, this Mu Rong Qianji has issued a bounty for clues. He also claimed that he wants to see a living person and not a dead one. Young master, with this ruckus from Mu Rong Qianji, it will make our kill order useless. Is this old man Mu Rong expressing his stance to us, or is he restraining us in secret? The expression on that young man's face kept changing as he could not make up his mind. Mu Rong Qianji had always acted strangely and unexpectedly. It was impossible for one to guess his motives. However, regardless of Mu Rong Qianji's motives, as soon as he issued the bounty. Indeed, it had made the bounty of the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect become useless. Everyone knew that the bounty for the second-level bounty of the Heavenly Luo Daoist sect was only 80,000 gold crystal stones. To acquire these 80,000 gold crystal stones, they must come with Qin Wushuang's head. In comparison, if they had truly grasped the clues of Qin Wushuang, rather than fighting with Qin Wushuang to redeem the 80,000 bounty, how could it be as easy as taking this clue to Mu Rong Qianji to redeem the 100,000 bounty? For this account, even an idiot would calculate it, not to mention those astute martial artists. Young master, although that third matter is not related to Qin Wushuang, it is related to the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan. It's about that 100-leaf Qin clan. Instantly, this Black Panther narrated the recent events of the 100-leaf Qin clan in full detail. Naturally, the young master he spoke of was Luo Ting, one of the most exceptional young people of the heavenly Luo Taoist sect. This Luo Ting had another identity. He was the fiancé of Miss Murong Su of the Floating Snow House. This relationship had been established by the previous generation when Luo Ting and Murong Su were still in their swaddling clothes. The heavenly Luo Taoist sect and the Floating Snow House shared the same strength and position in the Xian Yuan Mound. This marriage could be said to be a well-matched match. Because of this marriage, this Luo Ting had always been close to the Floating Snow House. Since he was a teenager, he often met with Murong Su. Luo Ting was extremely satisfied with Murong Su's temperament and appearance. He even often looked forward to the arrival of this marriage. However, he did not know if it was fate playing tricks on people, or Murong Su was born with a rebellious nature. Since a young age, although Murong Su did not hate Luo Ting, she was not close to him either. She even deliberately kept a respectful distance from him and avoided him. Initially, Luo Ting thought it was the reserved and bashful nature of a young girl. However, as he grew older, and as he gained a deeper understanding of Murong Su, he realized that Murong Su was not a girl who could not show her face. Her personality was natural and unrestrained. She was not a girl who did not dare to show herself in front of others because of her reserved and bashful nature. Although Luo Ting resisted such thoughts inwardly, he must admit that indeed, Murong Su did not have much appreciation for him. This made Luo Ting feel incredibly frustrated and defeated. As the years passed, this frustration and defeat gradually turned into a form of anger and resentment. He felt that Murong Su was using some method to belittle him and make him feel extremely uncomfortable with his self-esteem. For your information, although Luo Ting did not come from the Heavenly Emperor Eight Gates, across the entire Xian Yuan Mound, his talent was definitely one of the best among the young generation. If it wasn't the case, how could he have trained to the profound void martial stage at such a young age? Even if the heavenly Luo Taoist sect had intended to nurture him, even if he had encountered all kinds of fortuitous opportunities, they could not deny Luo Ting's talent. His talent and reputation had brought Luo Ting a lot of relationships with the opposite sect. In the Xian Yuan Mound, there were countless young girls who admired Luo Ting. Within the heavenly Luo Taoist sect, how many girls of the same age from the other two major surnames wanted to marry him? However, these relationships with the opposite sex did not improve Luo Ting's position in Murong Su's heart. In the end, Murong Su had treated him indifferently. Initially, Luo Ting was not a magnanimous young man. Murong Su's attitude had gradually twisted his heart. In his heart, the seed of hatred kept being planted and the flower of hatred kept blooming. Black Panther, you did a good job. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed across Luo Ting's mind. Young master, in my opinion. Black Panther had followed Luo Ting for many years and more or less understood Luo Ting's personality. When he saw Black Panther hesitating to speak, Luo Ting said lightly, "Black Panther, speak if you have something to say. Between us, there is no need to be evasive and hesitant." "Yes, young master. Black Panther has followed you for many years. It could be said that I have watched you grow up, become a talent and acquire your current position. In the future, I will certainly follow you until I am powerless to contribute to you." Black Panther finally entered the main topic after beating around the bush for a long time. "It's not that I am taking advantage of my seniority. Indeed, Black Panther feels that with your talent in the future, you will certainly become a feudal lord in the Xian Yuan Mound. Even if you were to enter the heavenly Luo Taoist sect, it would most likely happen. Young master, why don't you spend all your efforts on training? Regarding the matter of the Mu Rong family breaking the marriage contract, why don't you let the higher-ups of the sect handle it?" Black Panther's starting point was simple. He did not want Luo Ting to accumulate too much psychological pressure due to the matter with Murong Su. These psychological pressures had gradually turned into inner demons that controlled Luo Ting. Although there were no substantial effects at the moment, as time passed, the harm was foreseeable. Luo Ting stared at Black Panther with a cold gaze. Black Panther, I admit that in the heavenly Luo Daoist sect, even my relatives would not be as reliable as you. However, I want to say that I am an adult. Whatever I do, I have my own limits and opinions. Inwardly, Black Panther gave a long sigh as he knew that in the end, Luo Ting did not listen to him. When he had spoken up to this point, he already knew that it would be useless to say more. As a subordinate, he could only speak up to this point. If he continued to speak, most likely he would be punished for his word. Black Panther, arrange it, I will be leaving the sect for a while. Luo Ting stared at Black Panther with a sharp gaze and ordered again. Black Panther raised his head with astonishment. Young master, don't worry about my training. Leaving the sect does not mean that I am going to abandon my training plan. I am only curious, could it be that Qin Wushuang knows how to shrink and hide? Since he had entered the Xian Yuan Mound, with so many freelance martial artists, how could there not be any news? If that's the case, I will go and meet him myself. I will see if those remote and desolate human countries can nurture a monstrous genius. Young master, don't speak any more, I have made up my mind, you arrange it. Luo Ting's tone left no room for doubt. To be continued, if you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com, support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 469. Black Panther understood Luo Ting's personality and knew that he would not be able to change his mind once he had made up his mind. Young master, I will arrange it. Luo Ting nodded with satisfaction, and a trace of a sinister smile flashed across the corner of his mouth. After I have participated, you must do something else for me. Please instruct me, young master. Use your network to mobilize a group of elite warriors and make a trip to the human countries. I heard that Qin Wushuang has a family and a sect in the human countries. Especially his sect, they have openly become enemies with the heavenly Luo Daoist sect. Due to the 10,000-year agreement between the 5 major forbidden spiritual zones, the heavenly Luo Daoist sect cannot send elite warriors to participate. However, this time, the elite warriors I need you to mobilize must not be related to the heavenly Luo Daoist sect. It must not even be related to you or me, understand? Black Panther's expression was slightly surprised. Young master, tell me, do you understand? Luo Ting asked coldly, and his tone had clearly become more serious. Black Panther was surprised as he immediately said, I understand. Since you understand, you should know how to do it, right? Black Panther thought for a moment and did not know how to answer. He said with fear, Please instruct me, young master. No, I have nothing to instruct you. I need you to use your own brain. If you are loyal to me, you must complete this matter on your own. Regardless of success or failure, it will have nothing to do with me. After you succeed, you will only make some mole crickets and crickets disappear. It will not be much of a contribution. If you fail, it will also have nothing to do with me. You must eliminate all troubles before you reach this level of relationship. This fire must not be allowed to burn my body. This time, Black Panther had completely understood. His young master wanted to stay out of this matter and clear his name. This was a test of his loyalty to Black Panther. Young master, how about I send a few of my trusted men of sacrifice to do it? Most likely, those crickets and crickets in the human countries do not even have elite warriors at the void martial stage. I only need to send 3 or 5 men of sacrifice at the refined void martial stage. It will be enough to flatten that Stargaze palace. What do you think? Luo Ting said lightly. In the end, your personal men of sacrifice are still people of the heavenly Luo Daoist sect. Once the matter is exposed, it will involve the heavenly Luo Daoist sect. Exterminating an entire clan is a matter that would incur the wrath of both humans and gods, so we have to kick all the trouble to others. This method won't work. Then your subordinate will go and do a bounty mission. To pursue and kill Qin Wushuang, that was within the Xian Yuan Mound. It was reasonable for him to not be afraid of others knowing about the bounty mission. However, if they were to go to the human countries and slaughter them, how would they be able to place a bounty on such a mission? Do you think those people from the Rogue Cultivator Alliance are easy to deal with? Even if you put up an anonymous bounty, they have 100 ways to find out your identity. This method is also not advisable. Having two ideas rejected at once, the Black Panther was somewhat depressed. After thinking for a while, he suddenly had an idea. Young master, this matter must be handled by those rogue cultivators. Only then can we completely clear our relationship with them. There's only one way to mobilize these rogue cultivators and get rid of the Rogue Cultivator Guild. I'll personally get in touch with some rogue cultivators and bypass the Rogue Cultivator Guild to do the illegal trade. When he said here, Black Panther felt that this method was perfect as he added, Young master, you know that the freelance martial artists in the Xian Yuan Mound are as numerous as ants. Most of them are poor. For money, for development, they will definitely do these things. If we can use money to solve these problems, it's not a bad method. However, Black Panther, have you ever thought that while we are putting up a bounty to kill Qin Wushuang, at the same time, people are attacking Qin Wushuang's sect and family? Regardless, the heavenly Luo Daoist sect is the first suspect. This method is still not perfect. Initially, Black Panther thought that this method was already good enough. Unexpectedly, he still got snubbed. Young master, then in your opinion, what is the most perfect method? The most perfect method? Of course, it's killing with a borrowed knife. After Luo Ting had finished speaking these words, the eerie smile on the corner of his mouth became even more obvious. Killing with a borrowed knife? Whose knife? Inwardly, Black Panther was filled with questions. Apparently, he could not understand how to implement this strategy. Whoever is greedy, we will borrow their knife. Black Panther, in this world, how many motives are there to kill people? How many can you list? Luo Ting asked slowly. Black Panther thought for a moment and answered. The motive to kill people is only for benefits, or because of hatred, or because of beauty. Yes, you are right. It's not hatred nor beauty, we are talking about benefit. You know, deep in the bones of human beings, they are all greedy. You are not unfamiliar with the words of being blinded by benefits, right? We will use such benefits to drive those knives that have yet to reveal their true colors. Young master, I would like to hear the details. Hearing Luo Ting speak with such seriousness, Black Panther could not help but become interested. Think about how much benefits there are in the human countries that would make the elite warriors of the Xian Yuan Mound kill people at all costs. Didn't you say it a moment ago? Most of the freelance martial artists are poor people. The more poor they are, the more they would have the evil nature of a desperado in their bones. Once there are enough benefits, it would be enough for them to ignore all consequences. That human countries do not have enough benefits for them to run around. However, your mouth is on your face. Could it be that you can't make up some beautiful rumors? As soon as Luo Ting spoke these words, Black Panther was instantly enlightened. Instantly, all of his confusion had become clear. That's right, he would make up rumors. Sometimes, rumors would drive people crazier than the truth. Once Black Panther had understood his thoughts, he also laughed and bowed to say, Young master, rest assured, I already know what to do for this matter. Borrowing a knife to kill people, that's right, it's borrowing a knife to kill people. Ha ha, young master, for sure I will make up a beautiful rumor and let those greedy butcher knives rush to the human countries. Remember, do it cleanly. The first principle of this matter is to not let trouble entangle the heavenly Luo Daoist sect. This is the bottom line. Black Panther patted his chest. Young master, if spreading rumors can also bring trouble, then I would have lived my life in vain. Don't worry, for this matter, no one will know. It will be as if that rumor had grown out of thin air. Luo Ting was overjoyed. Good, then I will wait at the Xian Yuan Mound for the day when the wonderful news comes. Yes. Black Panther retreated respectfully. As Luo Ting watched Black Panther leave, the muscles on his face trembled slightly. Evil lights flashed in his eyes. Murong Su, you are running away from me, belittling me, humiliating me, and insulting me. I will use my actions to answer you. I will let the outside world know that you, Murong Su, are a disaster wherever you go. Those who have interacted with you, Murong Su, will not have a good ending. His crazy and vicious self-talk, and his twisted and almost perverted expression made Luo Ting appear extremely terrifying and malevolent. At the Crest Mountain, Qin Wushuang trained every morning and night. He was rather carefree as he explored the area around the Crest Mountain. Although after a few days, Qin Wushuang had yet to shed his mortal body and enter the void martial stage, the changes brought by his daily training were apparent. He knew that the void martial stage was right before him. Perhaps it would arrive in the next moment. Perhaps it would take another 10 days or half a month to knock on the door. All of this was only a sign. He could not pinpoint the exact time. To put it precisely, this was not only a process of training, but also a breakthrough on the psychological level. He needed an opportunity and an epiphany. And Bao Bao and Lone took turns to guard him. At the same time, these two guys were also training hard with the pupil attachment technique. This pupil attachment technique was extraordinary. First, it had a high requirement for their pupils' training. Each day, they must use the depth of their pupils to focus on a certain target, and they must do it without blinking. This was to train the penetrating power of the pupils. This was only the first step. To truly master this pupil attachment technique, besides these basic skills, they must train the sensitivity of the pupils to light. In other words, they must use their eyes to challenge the dazzling sunlight, the bright moonlight, and the mirror-like lake water. In general, the more sensitive they were to light, it meant the higher their pupil dilation and sensitivity. For such training method, if they were not elite warriors at the void martial stage, most likely they would have become blind. After practicing for a few days, Bao Bao and Lone learned why the minimum requirement for this technique was the refined void martial stage. Without the strength of the void martial stage, it would be suicide to train this pupil attachment technique. Qin Wushuang did not have a fixed schedule for his daily homework. Currently, his dantian was filled to the brim. In other words, his hard conditions had met the requirement for a breakthrough. Currently, inside his dantian, the spiritual qi was abundant and rich. And now, this spiritual qi was like a silkworm spitting out silk. It kept spitting out silk and forming a cocoon. The void martial stage was a stage where one would return to one's natural state and transform into the void. In other words, once he entered the void martial stage, inside his body, there would no longer be bits and pieces of spiritual qi. These spiritual qi would form into a whole entity. This whole entity would directly merge with the martial artist's spiritual perception to form a whole entity. And this whole entity would be the primordial spirit. Of course, this primordial spirit was not the true supreme Tao stage. It was only an illusory primordial spirit inside his body. It was a miraculous illusory body that could not live on its own after leaving the body. This illusory body could not be counted as a true independent life form. This was the most fundamental difference between the void martial stage and the divine martial stage. At the divine martial stage, the primordial spirit would merge with the soul to form the divine soul. Even if the body was destroyed, the divine soul could leave the body and live independently. Of course, the primordial spirit formed at the void martial stage was in fact the embryonic form of the divine soul. It was the starting point on the path to the supreme Tao stage. Only the primordial spirit could climb to the immortal divine soul stage step by step after going through thousands of tempering. Without this primordial spirit stage, of course, one would not be able to reach the supreme Tao stage. This was a gradual process. Currently, Qin Wushuang did not completely grasp these principles. He was also exploring one step at a time. Each step after entering the upper sky spiritual martial force was a height that Qin Wushuang had never reached in his previous life. The higher he advanced, it meant he was one step closer to the supreme Tao stage. P.S. Since I went out today, I'm missing one chapter. Tomorrow there will be 4 chapters. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 470. Red, Blue, Green, Purple. So cool. Suddenly, Bao Bao jumped up and kept shouting, "Great! Second, this is great! Third, what are you shouting for?" Lone jumped out from the bushes not far away. "Ha ha! A moment ago I could already separate the colors from the light source, and it's getting clearer. Second, this means that my pupils are extremely sensitive to the light source. Ha ha! It seems that among the 3 of us, I am the first one to master the pupil attachment technique." Bao Bao was still extremely excited as he danced with his hands and feet. Lone twitched his mouth. "That's because Boss has not practiced it yet. If Boss had practiced with us, I believe he would have mastered it first." Bao Bao laughed mischievously. "That might not be the case. Although Boss has superior talent, he does not have the bloodline of the ancient spiritual monkey." "How do you know Boss does not have the bloodline of the ancient divine clan?" "The ancient divine clan does not only have the spiritual monkey. The immemorial era was the era of the divine devil. Divine devils were everywhere. Even if your ancestor is the spiritual monkey, it's not necessarily superior to those of the ancient divine devil bloodline." Lone Tianxing was competitive. He knew that he was at a disadvantage in terms of bloodline. Certainly, he would not be as good as Bao Bao in terms of training. Of course, he was not jealous. On the contrary, he was used to getting along with Bao Bao. He was only unwilling to admit Bao Bao's strength verbally. Thus, at this moment, he could not help but pull Qin Wushuang out to speak. Bao Bao chuckled. "Then let's count how long it took for me to master the pupil attachment technique and how long it took Boss." When he said here, suddenly, Bao Bao looked towards the back of the mountain. "By the way, how is Boss? His breakthrough this time seems to be somewhat different?" Since Lone was on guard duty a moment ago, Bao Bao had the time to practice the pupil attachment technique. This time, Boss is breaking through a level. Of course, it's different. However, I see that he is relaxed during this time, there should not be much problem. Bao Bao nodded. Second, to speak the truth, Boss's strength and potential are truly terrifying. When he was cultivating, I had observed him. I always felt that Boss's body was like a huge treasure trove. There were many unimaginable treasures waiting to be opened. You said that Boss has the blood of the gods in his body, but I really don't dare to say that he doesn't. With regards to Qin Wushuang's talent, loneliness could empathize with him. Wait, what is that? Suddenly, Bao Bao's pupils shrank as he looked at the horizon with astonishment. In the sky, it was as if a cloud was drifting over. Its speed was so fast that it looked more like a bolt of lightning. Quick, inform the boss. Lone grabbed the long sword that he had seized from General Manager Su. "I will restrain the enemy," Bao Bao said with a gloomy expression. "No need, boss is already aware and is rushing over." As he spoke, the cloud in the air suddenly descended and landed directly on the hillside. Almost at the same time, Qin Wushuang also rushed before Lone and Bao Bao. He growled, "Step back." Qin Wushuang had learned his lesson from last time. He held the graceful spiritual Bao lightly with one hand and maintained a posture that he could attack at any moment. He shouted lightly, "Hold on there." Below the hillside, that cloud dispersed and a figure slowly appeared from within. This person had an extremely eye-catching purple beard. When Qin Wushuang and the others saw him, they were all astonished. This person was Mu Rongqianji. Mu Rongqianji seemed to have disregarded Qin Wushuang's attack formation as he kept walking up the slope. Although his steps appeared light, when he walked, they appeared extremely graceful. Each step appeared to be a small step to the naked eye. However, in fact, the distance was more than a dozen meters. Bao Bao revealed an unsightly expression as he stuttered. This is the ability to shrink the ground into inches. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang was moved. He had also heard about the divine ability to shrink the ground into inches. Now, after witnessing it with his own eyes, he finally understood when Bao Bao had to point it out. Indeed, as Bao Bao had said, the distance from the bottom of the hill to where they were standing was more than 300 meters. However, this Mu Rongqianji seemed to have only taken 3 or 4 steps, and he was already close to 300 meters away. "Young man, I didn't expect that we would meet here." Mu Rongqianji's voice did not contain any anger or happiness. His tone was calm, as if he was talking about something unrelated to them. Qin Wushuang's pupils also shrank rapidly. "I repeat, stop your steps." Mu Rongqianji laughed and stopped his footsteps abruptly. Indeed, he stood in the same place. He looked at Qin Wushuang with interest and turned to look at Bao Bao and Lone. Lone would have been fine, but when he stopped to look at Bao Bao, Mu Rongqianji revealed a playful smile from the corner of his mouth. "You little guy, you should be that little monkey from the Monkey King Mountain, right?" Under Mu Rongqianji's power, although Bao Bao was not afraid, he could not help but feel stupefied when his identity was exposed all of a sudden. He could not speak a word. "And you?" Mu Rongqianji turned back to look at Qin Wushuang, the young talent from the human countries. "You saved your family, sect, and even your country with your power alone. I must say, at your age, in the human countries, you are very impressive for doing all these things." These few words did not contain any hostility or threat. However, these few words were more powerful than any weapon. It had destroyed almost half of Qin Wushuang's hostility and defense line. Lone looked at Qin Wushuang and suddenly, he shouted, "That day, I saw you at the Freelance Martial Artist Union. Later on, I heard that you are a major figure in the Xian Yuan Mound and the head of the floating snow house. Could it be that a major figure like you is going to go against our boss, a young and inexperienced person?" "Yes, Senior Mu Rong, since you recognized us. We will not play hide and seek with you. Senior Mu, with your identity, it's somewhat unreasonable for you to make things difficult for us." However, Qin Wushuang did not say anything. Although his expression was calm, between his brows, there was a firm determination. There was not the slightest trace of cowering or fear. He only stood there and maintained the attacking posture with the graceful spiritual bow. Mu Rongqianji laughed. "Little monkey, why do you think that I have come here to make things difficult for you guys? Senior Mu Rong, don't play dumb. That day, at the Freelance Martial Artist Union, you placed a bounty of 100,000 for a clue to find us. It seems that someone has already claimed your 100,000 bounty. You have spent a lot of money." Bao Bao's tone did not show any weakness. "Young man, if I were you, I would put away my bow and arrows." Mu Rongqianji looked at Qin Wushuang with a smile and continued to speak slowly. "Firstly, your bow and arrows are good. However, with your current strength, the success rate is less than 1% if you want to use a heaven-defying weapon to deal with me. Secondly, if I have hostile intentions, I have 100 ways to approach you guys without being detected. Lastly, all the hostility is only your one-sided imagination." Let's find a place and talk. As he spoke, Mu Rong Qianji's body seemed to have been smashed into countless pieces like a mirror. He had disappeared into thin air. This type of disappearance was not an illusion. Instead, it was a complete disappearance of both his soul and body. This was a completely different method compared to the void martial stage's concealment. Just when Qin Wushuang and his friends were dumbstruck, suddenly Qin Wushuang felt someone lightly patted his shoulder. He immediately turned his head and there was another wave of emptiness. There was not a single figure. Regardless of how they urged their spiritual perception to search, they had no clue. "Haha, I will wait for you on the hillside." Mu Rong Qianji's voice rolled in from all directions. It was as if a few hundred voices had rolled into their eardrums at the same time. Ever since Qin Wushuang had stepped onto the path of martial arts, he had never felt such frustration. He could only make a hand gesture to Bao Bao and Lone. Then, he jumped rapidly towards the hillside. On top of the hillside, Mu Rong Qianji sat on the ground with a leisurely expression. He had been waiting for a long time. "Sit." Mu Rong Qianji pointed to the lawn across from him lightly. Regardless of how thick Qin Wushuang's face was, he could not shoot arrows at Mu Rong Qianji. Additionally, he was certain that Mu Rong Qianji's previous words were not exaggerated. With his strength, even with the assistance of the graceful spiritual Bao, he could not harm Mu Rong Qianji. "Ha, old man," Bao Bao was rather straightforward. "We did not play hide and seek with you, yet you played hide and seek with us. Nice skill. Admirable, admirable." Mu Rong Qianji stroked his purple beard and laughed. "Little monkey, earlier you boasted that you have the bloodline of the ancient spiritual monkey. No need to envy my little skills. If you grow up smoothly, perhaps in 10 or 20 years, it will be my turn to envy you." Bao Bao scratched his ears and scratched his cheeks as he said with a chuckle, "Will I be as powerful as you in 10 or 20 years? If the bloodline of the divine clan is completely awakened, you will only be stronger than me." Mu Rong Qianji was rather open and amiable. He did not put on any airs before the younger generation. "Ha, then I am looking forward to it." Bao Bao was extremely excited. He rolled his eyes and asked again, "Old man, your move a moment ago was truly cool. How did you do it?" "Little monkey, if you want to use these idle words to attract my attention, I advise you not to think of such little ideas. For my moves, you will understand when you break through the restraint of the void martial stage, shatter the void, merge the great Tao, and enter the exquisite mysterious boundary stage." To put it bluntly, shattering the void was these simple words. Once one had reached this stage, within a certain range, they could completely ignore the rules of space. They could shatter the void, open up another passage, and teleport instantly. Of course, the distance of such teleportation would depend on the strength of one's strength. It was not completely out of the control of the rules. In the end, the exquisite mysterious boundary stage was not the supreme Tao stage. Even for the supreme Tao stage, it was impossible to completely ignore the rules of space. For your information, in the great Tao of the universe there were only two strongest rules. They were the rules of space and time. The four directions were called space. Since ancient times it was called time. The so-called space and time rules were the rules of space and time. Of course, even Mu Rong Qianji could not touch these profound rules. It was because even someone as powerful as Mu Rong Qianji could not touch the existence of these rules. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Perhaps she was still touring the human countries right now. For your information, regardless of the human countries, the pressure of life is less than your Xian Yuan mound. I'm guessing that Sister Murong just wants to relax. Relax. Mu Rong Qianji sighed softly. If it's just relaxing, I'm not worried about anything. I'm only worried that her relaxing doesn't make her mood better. Instead, it makes her mood even heavier. That won't happen. I see that big sister Morong is still very cheerful. She's talking and laughing with us. Old man, don't worry. In the human countries, even if big sister Morong walks sideways, no one can threaten her. Mu Rong Qianji bitterly shook his head. Little monkey, if it was only in the human countries, there really isn't anything to worry about. However, don't forget that the human countries are well developed. Besides entering the Xian Yuan Mound, you can enter the Heavenly Fire southern border from the south, the Endless Eastern Sea from the east, and the Illusion Heavenly Lake from the west. For these places, which one of them is not as terrifying as the Xian Yuan Mound as the Forbidden Spiritual Zone? Old man, Sister Murong should know the severity of her actions, right? Mu Rong Qianji did not answer. Instead, he stopped to look at Qin Wushuang. Lord Mu Rong, your daughter is exceptionally intelligent. She is definitely not a willful and reckless person. This was Qin Wushuang's evaluation. Although it was short, it had hit the nail on the head. Although Qin Wushuang and Murong Su had only interacted a few times, they both had a good impression of each other. From Qin Wushuang's understanding of Miss Murong, she should be a girl that was soft on the outside but firm on the inside. Inwardly, she had her own opinions. Mu Rong Qianji gave a long sigh. Escaping from the marriage and running away from home, if these are not willful and reckless actions, what could be more willful and reckless actions? Apparently, Mu Rong Qianji did not know whether to laugh or cry. However, everyone could hear that from his tone, there was more doting than blaming. One could even say that from Mu Rong Qianji's tone, there was some indulgence. Bao Bao spoke with conviction. Why did she run away from home? It's because the marriage is coming. Why did she escape from the marriage? For sure, it's because she did not like this marriage. Old man, for such matter, if it were anyone else, they would also escape. Honestly, Mu Rong Qianji did not blame his daughter too much for her actions of escaping from the marriage. Although escaping from the marriage had caused the floating snow house to face a lot of pressure, the protest and pressure from the heavenly Luo Daoist sect had also made it difficult for him to conduct himself. However, compared to his daughter's lifetime happiness, he felt that these pressures were insignificant. Of course, being the head of the floating snow house, of course he could not deal with this matter as he wished. On the surface, he still had to do something. Thus, he had left the floating snow house and arrived at the border area of the Xian Yuan Mound. Rather than saying that he had come out to search for his daughter, he was worried that his daughter had encountered trouble outside. One could even say that he was only making a gesture to ease the pressure from the heavenly Luo Daoist sect. In fact, Mu Rong Qianji had also received a lot of information. He also knew about the relationship between Murong Su and Qin Wushuang. Only, he did not know much about the details. It was because the appearance of the name Qin Wushuang had made Mu Rong Qianji more or less worried. Since he loved his daughter dearly, he could not help but worry that his daughter was not experienced enough and had been deceived by people from the outside world. Thus, regardless of the cost, he collected information about Qin Wushuang and urgently wanted to meet with Qin Wushuang. This meeting with Qin Wushuang had dispelled a lot of his doubts and worries. At least, he saw a form of spirit and a form of responsibility from Qin Wushuang. Young man, there are a lot of rumors from the outside world. There is also a lot of pressure on your shoulders. Do you know why the heavenly Luo Daoist sect has issued a bounty to kill you? Qin Wushuang said lightly. If it's related to that young master Luo Ting of the heavenly Luo Daoist sect, I would not be surprised. Mu Rong Qianji was stunned. In terms of strength, perhaps there is still a big gap between you and that Luo Ting. However, in terms of breadth of mind and shrewdness, I am afraid that Luo Ting is 10 streets ahead of you. Haha, old man. That young master Luo Ting is engaged to senior sister Mu Rong. Could it be that because of the relationship between senior sister Mu Rong and my boss, he would not vent his anger on my boss? Bao Bao asked with an exaggerated tone. With my observation and understanding of Luoting, if the bounty has been put aside for a long time without any progress, it's highly possible that he would make a move himself. Bao Bao did not care. Then let him do it himself. Ever since the heavenly Luo Daoist sect had issued the bounty, we are destined to not let them off. Mu Rong Qianji reminded him with a smile. Also, let me remind you that Luo Ting is at the profound void martial stage. If he were to appear before you now, I am afraid it would not be easy to deal with him. Qin Wushuang stood up and said to Mu Rong Qianji, Lord Mu Rong, the heavenly Luo Daoist sect still holds some personal grudges with me. I am afraid it's not because of your daughter. Mu Rong Qianji smiled lightly and fixed his gaze on Qin Wushuang with a profound gaze. After a while, he also stood up and flicked his sleeves lightly. Young man, the floating snow house has our own principles when doing things. In fact, my 100,000 bounty will always be there. In fact, it's a form of protection for you. However, this form of protection may not have much effect. Once the heavenly Luo Daoist sect has made up their mind, the consequences would be terrifying. Before you are prepared, it's best to not touch their edge. Unless the crisis of the heavenly Emperor Qin clan can be resolved. Mu Rong Qianji added. This was a piece of advice to Qin Wushuang. Honestly, Mu Rong Qianji admired Qin Wushuang. Due to the strong first impression, Mu Rong Qianji admired Qin Wushuang for all his achievements in the human countries. And through this short meeting with Qin Wushuang, he saw a different side of him compared to those exceptional disciples of the Xian Yuan Mound. From Qin Wushuang, he did not see the arrogance of a genius disciple. He also did not see any sense of superiority, complacency, or any bad habit. He was calm, determined, and would not panic in the face of chaos. It was apparent that Qin Wushuang's reputation as a genius and all his achievements did not come out of nowhere. Naturally, he had his reasons behind it. This was the first time they had met. Naturally, Mu Rong Qianji could not speak too much and would not express his standpoint. However, he was satisfied that the existence of such a young man would be a good restraint to the heavenly Luo Daoist sect. As long as the heavenly Luo Daoist sect had this restraint, the days of the floating snow house would become more relaxed. They would not have to face the heavenly Luo Daoist sect's urging for marriage every day. For sure, I will remember Lord Mu Rong's advice. Only, the tree may desire peace, but the wind will not stop. I only hope that the heavenly Luo Daoist sect will not go too far and leave some leeway for everything. Or else, even if I know it's impossible, I will fight to the death. Qin Wushuang did not make an impassioned speech. He only expressed his standpoint clearly. Bao Bao also chimed in. That's right, it will not be easy for that heavenly Luo Daoist sect to kill us. Mu Rong Qianji waved his hand and laughed. Today's meeting will end here. Take care of yourselves. Since your whereabouts are no longer a secret, if I were you guys, I would either change my appearance completely or leave the Xian Yuan Mound. For now, it doesn't matter whether you guys go or not at the Heavenly Emperor Mountain. When he said here, Mu Rong Qianji shook his head and laughed. There was a trace of a strange smile on his face as he walked down the slope. After only a few steps, Mu Rong Qianji's figure had disappeared completely from the sky. Bao Bao gave a long sigh of relief and said, Thank the heavens, I thought we would not be able to escape today. Qin Wushuang smiled lightly. If Lord Mu Rong truly wanted to kill us, I am afraid we would not even have the chance to be afraid. Lone gave a helpless sigh. I must admit that this old man has a powerful aura. It seems that this old man is the legendary elite warrior at the exquisite mysterious boundary stage. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 472. Mu Rongqianji's unexpected visit, especially his last reminder, had increased Qin Wushuang and the others' sense of crisis. Apparently, Mu Rongqianji's last words were to remind them that someone had revealed their secret to him. That was why he had found them so easily and confirmed Qin Wushuang's identity. "Boss, it seems that General Manager Su's companion has revealed our matter in the end. I am afraid that people of the primary central sect will find this place soon, right? Boss, should we retreat now?" Qin Wushuang shook his head with determination. "Retreat now? No, let's stay here and not go anywhere." "Then let's change our attire," Bao Bao suggested. "How about me and Third revert to our true forms? It will save us the trouble of changing. With 3 of us, it's easy to attract other people's attention." The purple flame electric beast did not object. "Do whatever you want. Overall, this crest mountain is extremely suitable for training. I have a feeling that I will achieve a substantial breakthrough at this crest mountain." Bao Bao and Lone nodded at the same time. Of course, they were not afraid of trouble. Hearing Qin Wushuang's words, their blood also surged. "Okay, boss, we will stay here with you until you break through. However, I think we should go deeper. This crest mountain is extremely steep, we should go deeper. Perhaps there will be other fortuitous opportunities at this crest mountain?" Lone said with a whimsical thought. Just as Bao Bao was about to refute him, unexpectedly, Qin Wushuang said with a smile, "I have the same intention, let's go deeper. Look, that mountain peak, from afar, seems to be wrapped by a layer of red clouds. I heard that it is the crater of the crest mountain. It is called the Wild Flame Cliff." Wild Flame Cliff? This name is truly eye-catching. However, it seems that mountain peak could spurt out fire at any moment. It is a giant furnace. "Boss, we cannot go there, right?" "Yes, let's go there." Lone appeared extremely excited as he rubbed his fists and rushed over. "Third, could it be that you do not have the guts to come with me?" Provoked by Lone, of course Bao Bao would not admit defeat. "Let's see who doesn't have the guts." Qin Wushuang saw that these 2 guys were so competitive that they could even bicker over such a trivial matter. He smiled bitterly and chased in that direction. There was a reason why there were no sects to settle down in this crest mountain. With the cultivation of Qin Wushuang and the others, the closer they got to the Wild Flame Cliff, the more difficult it became for them. Their skin could feel waves of heat rising, as if they were on fire. "Oh my God, this temperature is like an oven!" Bao Bao cried out. But GMO was very happy. "The temperature is good, I like it." Lone was good at using fire, so he had a good sense of the fire element. This little bit of temperature was nothing to it. As the saying goes, looking at a mountain is close enough to kill a horse. It looked like the opposite mountain peak. Even though Qin Wushuang and the others were fast, it still took them a long time to walk. Along the way, strangely, Qin Wushuang did not speak a single word. He only walked with a focused expression. If his footsteps were not moving forward, his expression was like a sculpture that was in deep thought. Suddenly, Qin Wushuang's brows moved. His entire body felt a wave of blazing heat burning madly. Especially at the dantian in his lower abdomen, it was as if a ball of fire was burning there. All the genuine qi inside his body also started to stir slowly. Like a tornado, it rotated at a high speed inside his dantian. This situation made Qin Wushuang realize something inwardly. "Second, third, protect me!" Qin Wushuang shouted in a low voice. He shook his long spear and started to perform spear techniques on the spot. Qin Wushuang had created 3 moves of the hegemon breaking formation spear technique. To be precise, it was 2.5 moves. The first awakening move was the starting move. This spear move came from the heart. The exquisite part was the heart technique and the changes. Caught off guard, a sudden spear move was like a sudden clap of thunder. And the nucleus gathering move was the essence part. Qin Wushuang at this moment, when he performed it, the flames were naturally monstrous. At this moment, what he was most sensitive to was not the other elements. Naturally, it was the fire element. In the vicinity of the wild flame cliff, there was no natural element more active than the fire element. Qin Wushuang's move was naturally based on the local conditions. When the spear was brought out, the flames were condensed, driving the spear light, dancing and roaring in the sky. The scene was like a fire dragon, wreaking havoc in the sky, burning the entire horizon red for half a day. Then, Qin Wushuang guided the spear, and the flames caused by the spear light suddenly rose again. The intensity of the fire also changed from its initial faint red color to a blazing red color. The flames soared into the sky, as if tens of thousands of fire crows had gathered together to drag down the sun. Wherever the spear light touched, a huge fireball was formed. Outside the fireball, there were provocative flames, swaying wildly in the air, as if they could burst out at any time to wreak havoc. This move was the evolution of the nucleus gathering move, the third move, deep nucleus move. This was a move that Qin Wushuang had created on the Monkey King Mountain, but he had not perfected it. At this moment, in a favorable environment, his mind was opened, and a flash of inspiration flashed through his mind, and he actually performed it in one go. Perfect! The creation of this move, which had evolved from the previous move's kingdom, could be described as perfect. Qin Wushuang's spear tip was pressed against the big red fireball, but he did not release it. As long as his spear light trembled at any moment, he would be able to completely activate this extremely hot, highly fused fire. Profound mysteries. Once this attack struck a target, this large fireball would immediately explode, creating a fatal blaze. The instant this deep nucleus move was formed, the genuine qi inside Qin Wushuang's dantian also slowly stopped its previous high-speed circulation. At this moment, Qin Wushuang only felt that inside his dantian there was a ball of hot air. Like a little mouse, it was scuttling around inside his dantian. This ball of hot air was like an egg. It seemed to be nurturing a new life. Void Martial Stage. Instantly, these three words flashed across Qin Wushuang's mind. These three words made Qin Wushuang beam with joy. Finally, it was here. After waiting for so long and brewing for so long, the door to the refined Void Martial Stage had finally opened. Qin Wushuang knew that that ball of hot air belonged to his primordial spirit. Although this primordial spirit had not merged with his spiritual perception, clearly, this primordial spirit had already started to operate. It had started to familiarize itself with his body's condition and sought to merge with his spiritual perception. The Void Martial Stage was to refine one's body into the void and condense the primordial spirit. In fact, this primordial spirit was not an independent life form, but an illusory primordial spirit. It was just the embryonic form of a god. Only by entering the divine Tao stage would one truly possess life and achieve the power of the divine soul. At this moment, the primordial spirit was only an embryonic form. It was a seed that needed to be refined continuously to upgrade into the divine soul. Despite this fact, to Qin Wushuang, the Void Martial Stage was an unprecedented experience. It was a height that he could not even imagine in his previous life. Qin Wushuang was immersed in extreme joy and did not realize the drastic changes around him. It was a change where the grass and trees withered and the earth shook. "Boss, you succeeded?" Bao Bao was the first one to jump over. "Congratulations, boss. You are at the refined Void Martial Stage." "Ha ha, now, us three brothers are at the refined Void Martial Stage." Lone also laughed proudly. Bao Bao looked around at the terrain. The best part is that with this wild flame cliff as a training ground, those signs after boss breakthrough were all covered by the soaring flames of the wild flame cliff. "Boss, I cannot help but admire you. At that time, you already thought of this problem, right?" Qin Wushuang smiled lightly and nodded. "Yes, initially when you and Second broke through, there were great movements. And this crest mountain was the most suitable place for it. It allowed me to break through without any reaction from the outside world. Qin Wushuang put away the hegemon breaking formation spear and raised his head to look at that mountain peak. He saw that behind the peak of the mountain, there were still soaring flames. The wild flame cliff is behind this mountain peak, right? Qin Wushuang said with emotion. Are you interested in going to take a look? Of course, Lone could not ask for more. Since Bao Bao had been here for a while, he had gradually adapted to this deadly high temperature. All of them followed Qin Wushuang to climb up the mountain. This mountain peak was extremely steep. Fortunately, it was not lush and the path was not difficult to walk on. Because of the high temperature for a long time, ordinary plants could not survive. The plants that could survive here were all plants that could withstand the high temperature. These plants did not have many branches or leaves. Third, don't you think that Wild Flame Cliff is the best place for you to practice the pupil attachment technique? Where would you find a light source that shines 24 hours a day? Reminded by Qin Wushuang, Bao Bao also realized the truth as he said with joy, That's right, boss, you are smart. Could it be you also want to practice this pupil attachment technique? For now, I don't have the time to practice this pupil attachment technique. You too can use this chance to practice. There were still many things waiting for Qin Wushuang to do. No matter how he looked at it, the pupil attachment technique would not be his priority. Since he had just entered the refined void martial stage, he needed to consolidate his new stage and familiarize himself with the different changes brought by the new stage as well as the abilities he already possessed. Most importantly, he must consolidate his compatibility with the graceful spiritual Bao. The defeat before Mu Rongqianji had made Qin Wushuang fully realize that it was not enough to have a powerful weapon. He must refine this weapon to its strongest state. After entering the refined void martial stage, naturally Qin Wushuang's strength had increased tremendously. Naturally, he needed to put in more effort to combine it with the graceful spiritual Bao. Currently, the hegemon breaking formation spear was training his close combat power, and the graceful spiritual Bao was a long-distance attack. It was the existence that determined the limit of Qin Wushuang's combat power. Thus, at this stage, the development of the power of the graceful spiritual Bao was of utmost importance. Besides the graceful spiritual Bao, Qin Wushuang also remembered that initially at the Monkey King Mountain, the Silver Monkey King had given him a gift, purple cloud in yang fruit. This miraculous fruit would allow him to refine the purple cloud in yang wings at the refined void martial stage. It would allow him to possess the ability to fly only at the transformation void martial stage. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 473. To the current Qin Wushuang, these two matters were on par with each other. Only by combining these two matters could he maximize his combat power in a short period of time. Although Mu Rongqianji had reminded him to be careful of young master Luo Ting's personal attack. However, Qin Wushuang also had his capital. He was also confident that as long as he could take care of these two matters, if everything went smoothly, even if it was that Luo Ting, he would have the confidence to deal with him. Before he had broken into the refined void martial stage, he already had the power to kill an elite warrior at the transformation void martial stage with the graceful spiritual Bao. Now, after he had advanced to the refined void martial stage, his strength had increased by one level. If this level of improvement could be reflected in the combination of the graceful spiritual Bao, naturally, the increase in destructive power would be astonishing. Naturally, Qin Wushuang had his considerations as he had chosen this crest mountain. The more dangerous the environment, the more torturous the environment, the more it could stimulate one's potential. Additionally, the stimulation from such high temperature to the body was astonishing. As the so-called saying went, there was no sun or moon in the mountain. Unknowingly, half a month had passed. In this past half-month, regardless of Qin Wushuang, Bao Bao, or Lone, they had all made astonishing gains. One must say that in terms of training under the dangerous environment of the Crest Mountain, indeed, they had achieved twice the result with half the effort. Although Bao Bao had achieved some success with the pupil attachment technique, even Lone had gradually become enlightened and found the feeling. Under such environment, Lone did not put all his efforts into training the pupil attachment technique. Instead, he focused on increasing his own strength. Many of Lone's attack techniques were related to the fire attribute. Especially his genuine fire attacks, they all relied on the manipulation of the fire attribute. Under such environment, of course, Lone would not let go of any opportunity to increase his combat power. He was preparing to explore a new attack technique. For this technique, he needed to work on the purity and congealing of the genuine fire. Once he had figured it out, naturally, his attack power would increase several times. The purple flame electric beast was a spiritual beast from a few thousand years ago. In the Tian Xian land, he belonged to an extremely precious spiritual beast clan. He could continuously evolve and had a powerful perception of the natural attribute. The stronger the perception, the higher the attack power. In actual combat, the higher the attack power, the higher the combat power. What's more, the purple flame electric beast's defense and resistance were also extremely abnormal. Naturally, Bao Bao practiced the pupil attachment technique wholeheartedly. After cultivating for so long, it was already able to release its eye technique. Although the range of the attack was not far enough, it could be said that he had grasped the trick. During this time, it had been using some leaves that looked almost the same as its demonstration. Among the tens of thousands of leaves, he chose one and made some markings on its back. Then, he mixed it into all the other leaves and messed them up. After the confusion, it used its eye technique to track down the leaf that had been used. It could easily find the leaf that had used the eye technique. It had to be said that this was an inspiring success. As for Qin Wushuang, his harvest during this period of time was also very gratifying. Especially the fusion with the graceful spiritual Bao. Based on the original foundation, Qin Wushuang didn't spend too much effort and easily upgraded the graceful spiritual Bao to the level of proficiency that matched his realm. The power of the graceful spiritual Bao, even if I were to reach the refined void martial stage, I would at most be able to unleash 30% of its power. I am afraid that I have overestimated it. It's too slow to increase the combat power and destructive power of the graceful spiritual Bao by using the upgrade of the realm. After all, it's not every day to upgrade one's realm. The further I go, the slower the speed of upgrading will be. To unleash the greater power of the graceful spiritual Bao, I still need some external factors. Qin Wushuang could see that this graceful spiritual Bao was completely natural. However, these 3 jade-green arrows should be much inferior to the graceful spiritual Bao. Reasonably speaking, they should not be the arrows that matched the graceful spiritual Bao the earliest. Although, after a long time, the jade-green arrows appeared to be extremely compatible with the graceful spiritual Bao. However, in the end, the second wife was still the second wife. After all, there was a difference between the second wife and the first wife. Qin Wushuang felt that the first wife's arrows should be even more powerful when matched with this graceful spiritual Bao. To increase the destructive power of the graceful spiritual Bao, perhaps it would be feasible to do more research on the arrow aspect. There were many ways to increase the power of the arrows. For example, he could increase the quality of the arrows with materials, or add some skills and work on shooting technique. Another example would be to add some elemental attacks and merge the profound attacks into the body of the arrows. All of these ways had a certain degree of feasibility. Of course, this was not something that could be done in 1 or 2 days. It required some time, opportunity, and material conditions. Besides the graceful spiritual Bao, During this period of time, Qin Wushuang had never spared any effort to feel the effects of the purple cloud divine fruit in his body. This divine fruit was indeed very miraculous. Qin Wushuang could already feel that the divine power of this divine fruit was passing through his back. There was a wave of power that kept attacking him. This power did not bring any pain to Qin Wushuang. On the contrary, it made Qin Wushuang feel a wonderful baptism every day. This was an indescribable feeling of beauty. Qin Wushuang knew that this was because the purple cloud in yang wings was only the divine power of the divine fruit that changed the shape of his body. With the help of its bones and muscles, combined with the power of nature, the purple cloud in yang wings were formed. It could be said that it complemented each other. Naturally, he could control it with a single thought. In these few days, Qin Wushuang had gradually put the graceful spiritual Bao's homework on the back burner. Instead, he focused on the purple cloud in yang wings. Because of the baptism and changes brought by the purple cloud divine fruit, he increasingly realized that another great breakthrough was beckoning him. The opportunity was knocking on his door. He had no reason not to seize it. Sitting on the hillside, Qin Wushuang's entire body was currently wrapped in a wonderful white light. From afar, this white light looked like a white tree. The top part of the tree was very swollen, while the bottom part was only Qin Wushuang's torso and limbs. At this moment, this white light was constantly changing into different shapes on Qin Wushuang's body. And the main area of activity for these changes was on Qin Wushuang's back. Qin Wushuang felt that the muscles and bones on his back, as well as each inch of his skin, seemed to be undergoing a natural test. It was as if he was undergoing a painless surgery. Next, finally, that white light stopped its previous activity. As if it had chosen a location, suddenly, the white light became even more dazzling from the two sides of Qin Wushuang's spine all the way to his ribs. This dazzling light kept elongating and miraculously, it grew a pair of wings. These two large wings were even larger than the wings of the goshawk when they were spread out. Qin Wushuang's heart was as calm as still water. Unconsciously, his spiritual perception seemed to have reached an agreement with these white wings. They had formed a strong resonance. At this moment, Bao Bao and Lone also scrambled out from the dark. When they saw this scene from afar, they were astonished, excited, astonished, and somewhat in disbelief. So miraculous, is this the purple cloud in yang wings? Lone clicked his tongue and praised. Of course not, that color is white. It's far from the level of the purple cloud wings. I think there are at least a few evolutionary processes in between, right? Bao Bao spoke with the tone of an expert. Lone was too lazy to respond to Bao Bao as he cried out, "Boss, try flying, try flying." Bao Bao also joined in the clamor. "Yes, boss, try flying, let us see the world." Now, Qin Wushuang was also looking forward to it. He moved his spiritual perception, and the wings on his back started to move naturally. He kept flapping them and slowly flew up. Like a bird that had just learned how to fly, he started to glide slowly. However, the feeling of unfamiliarity only lasted for a moment. In a moment, Qin Wushuang's spiritual perception became familiar with this pair of wings. He could control it freely as if he was walking with his feet. Slowly, he became extremely skilled. "Wow, so cool. Boss, you are so mighty." Bao Bao shouted without restraint. And Lone kept shouting, speed up, boss, you must speed up. This kind of speed is not enough." Currently, Qin Wushuang was flying slowly. However, this was not his maximum speed. In fact, he had not even started to speed up. Now, he was only in the stage of adapting and exploring. Hearing Lone urging him to speed up, he was not in a rush. After getting used to it, he circled in the air for a moment. Then, he turned around and started to speed up. As soon as he flapped that pair of wings, he started to speed up. This speed was fast. As soon as he started to speed up, he entered the sprint stage. In a few ups and downs, He had traveled more than 100 miles. Qin Wushuang looked at the surrounding terrain with disbelief. He was sure that he had flown this far. Of course, this speed was much faster than traveling on foot. Even compared to those elite warriors at the transformation void martial stage he had seen, he was not slow. When he thought here, Qin Wushuang was pleasantly surprised. This was his first time flying. If he could become more mature in the future and improve his skills, he could definitely achieve an even faster speed. Most importantly, the purple cloud in Yang wings could evolve. Now it was only the first form and its speed was already impressive. Once it had evolved, its speed would be even more monstrous. Up to this moment, Qin Wushuang had finally realized the true power of the purple cloud's spiritual fruit. Even if it was only a fruit, the power of the supreme Tao was shocking. He turned his wings and glided back to the crest mountain. He dropped before Bao Bao and Lone. Bao Bao and Lone cheered endlessly. Just when they were about to go up to congratulate Qin Wushuang, suddenly, they heard a weak curse from the mountain slope. "Darn it, are you finally here?" Qin Wushuang, Bao Bao and the others were greatly surprised by this shout. With a face full of astonishment, they could not help but look around. Clearly, this voice had come from inside the mountain and did not seem to have come from the outside world. Just when they were searching around, that voice scolded again. "Grandson, since you are here, just stand there and wait. I will come out. So what if you have chased me for 3 million miles? Ha, in the end, you will not get what you want." Qin Wushuang and Bao Bao looked at each other in dismay. Clearly, they did not know what the other party was talking about. "Sir, perhaps you are mistaken. We are just passing by this crest mountain and are training here for a few days. We are not enemies." "HM?" That voice was also stunned. After a moment of thinking, he mumbled to himself, "You sound very young, you don't seem like it. Are you guys really not those grandsons of the Heavenly Punishing Villa and the Sound of Thunder sect?" Heavenly Punishing Villa, Sound of Thunder sect? Qin Wushuang was shocked. If he remembered correctly, these two major sects were the supreme powerhouses among the Heavenly Emperor 8 Gates. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please log on to www.chidian.com. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 474. The Heavenly Punishing Villa, the Sound of Thunder sect. These two names had enlightened even the apathetic. Initially, Qin Wushuang had seized a miscellaneous book from Zhu Dazhong of the Archaic Mysteries sect. Inside the book, there were many strange things recorded in the Tian Xian land. It also introduced the absolute powerhouses of the Tian Xian land. When he had introduced the Xian Yuan Mound, he had also heard these two names. Initially, Qin Wushuang did not understand the structure of the Xian Yuan Mound. Thus, he had not paid much attention. Now, thinking back, this Heavenly Punishing Villa and the Sound of Thunder sect were all extraordinary powerhouses. The instant Qin Wushuang was stunned, that voice said coldly, "Are you guys truly just passers-by?" "Definitely." From Qin Wushuang's voice, there was a form of honesty that made one unable to doubt him. Apparently, the voice of that person was somewhat weak, as if he was talking to himself. If you guys are just passers-by, the only advice I can give you is to leave this place quickly." Bao Bao asked curiously, "Why should we leave this place? Could it be this volcano is going to erupt?" Ha! That voice laughed bitterly as he asked, "Could the most terrifying thing in the world be a volcano erupting?" Bao Bao was at a loss for words, and did not know how to answer. Qin Wushuang also thought about the implied meaning of the other party's words with rapt attention. He always felt that there was some profound meaning within these words that was worth pondering. While he was thinking, suddenly, that voice became cold as he mumbled, "Now, I am afraid you guys can't leave even if you want to. Stunned, Qin Wushuang raised his head abruptly. He saw that the sky seemed to have been covered by a giant black curtain. Dark clouds covered the sky densely and the entire heaven and earth had darkened. It was as if a storm was about to come. This oppressive dark aura even suppressed the soaring flames from the wild flame cliff of the crest mountain. That voice shouted in a low voice, "If you don't want to die, quickly approach the wild flame cliff." Qin Wushuang, Bao Bao and the others knew that the situation was urgent and not trivial. Without time to think, they dashed towards the direction of the wild flame cliff. The wild flame cliff was extremely high above sea level. After Qin Wushuang and the other two had rushed up the cliff, they only saw a stone forest in all directions. A voice came from the stone forest, "Find a place to hide. Whether or not you can escape will depend on your fortune and luck." This voice was none other than the voice from before. At this moment, it actually contained a sense of majesty, causing Qin Wushuang and the others to have no choice but to obey. Just when Qin Wushuang and Bao Bao had hidden themselves, from the middle of the sky, bursts of light shadows fell like meteors to the top of this wild flame cliff. After the multicolored lights withdrew, groups of martial artists dressed similarly walked out. These cultivators only had two types of clothing. Clearly, they were from two different factions. There were 9 people in total, 4 on one side and 5 on the other. One of the groups consisted of 4 people, all of whom were wearing crimson armor. As for the group of 5, they were all wearing black armor. Each and every one of them had an unfriendly look on their faces. Clearly, they were not people to be trifled with. An old man with a white beard said slowly, "It's here. This is his limit. Being able to escape to this place is already very impressive. Search around." On the side of the black armor, a tall and sturdy guy waved his hand and gave the order. Clearly, this tall and sturdy guy was the leader of the black armor group. Just when the team was about to spread out and search, that weak voice from before laughed. "Indeed, it's you bunch of grandsons, you finally found this place. Ha ha ha, Yan Qingyun, Wu Lihu, you followed me across half of the Xian Yuan Mound, are you tired? Ha 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 ha." The more that voice spoke, the more proud he became. In the end, he laughed loudly. "Grandsons, how do you plan to serve me this time?" Yan Qingyun was that old man with the white beard and red armor. He was the leader of the red armor group. And Wu Lihu was that tall and sturdy guy from the black armor group. Wu Lihu opened his eyes wide and mocked him sarcastically. "Qin Shishuan, if you know what's good for you, then cooperate. Give us the thing, perhaps we can leave you with a complete corpse." Thing? That person they called Qin Shishuan was the one with the weak voice. He sneered even more coldly. "Do you see that 10,000 feet high cliff next to you? That cliff that emits fire and acts like a super oven all year round? Humph. We don't have time to chat with you. If you know what's good for you, give us the thing. If you want the thing, it will depend on whether you have the courage to jump down that cliff. I don't care to lie to you. I have already thrown all the things you want into the furnace. Ha ha, we'll all go our separate ways, no one will get it. Qin, don't play such tricks. If you were willing to throw those things down this volcano cliff, you would not have risked your life to get them. If you know what's good for you, then give us the thing. At least we can leave you with a complete corpse." "Elder Yen, why are you talking nonsense with him? We have already destroyed his primordial spirit and he is powerless to reverse the situation. Now, he is an arrow at the end of its flight. Why don't we take him down and torture him slowly? Let's see if he is more stubborn." This suggestion was made by that black-armored Wu Lihu. Yan Qingyun was old and rather mature. Upon hearing Wu Lihu's suggestion, he was somewhat worried. The Red Armor Group were disciples of the heavenly punishing villa of the Heavenly Emperor Mountain. And the Black Armor Group were elite warriors of the Sound of Thunder sect. This time, each of them had sent out 8 people. Initially, they were evenly matched in terms of numbers. However, During the process of pursuing Qin Shixuan had used many methods and killed 7 people. This way, the number of people on both sides had become unbalanced. For the heavenly punishing villa, the more people that died, the less people they would have left. For many things, they must consider more. When Qin Wuxuang heard up to this point, his heart thumped. Qin Shixuan? Hearing this name, could he be an elite warrior of the heavenly Emperor Qin clan? The matters in the world could not be so coincidental, right? Qin Wuxuang still found it hard to believe. However, these 2 groups of people were elite warriors of the heavenly Emperor 8-Gate. Then, it would not be strange if this Qin Shixuan had come from the heavenly mountain Qin clan. And most likely, the 2 powerhouses that had become enemies with the heavenly Emperor Qin clan were the heavenly punishing villa and the Sound of Thunder sect. While he was lost in his thoughts, suddenly, he felt someone pat his back lightly. He immediately turned around and was almost startled. Behind him, there was actually a person. This person had a pale complexion and appeared somewhat weak. However, when he stood there, he still gave off an unbelievably powerful feeling. "Young man, follow me." As soon as this person spoke, Qin Wuxuang immediately recognized that this person was Qin Shixuan. Qin Wuxuang did not have any room to refuse. As if it was natural, he followed behind this person. Bao Bao and Lone also walked out carefully from the 2 sides and followed that person to travel through the stone forest. In a moment, they found a deep and serene entrance. After countless twists and turns, they did not know how far they had gone. In the end, it was an extremely serene cave inside the mountain. Clearly, this cave had been artificially created. At the most active place of this volcano, although the creation of this cave was not the most extravagant, it had clearly taken a lot of hard work. After walking at least 20 or 30 miles deep into the cave, they finally arrived at a slightly wider platform. When Qin Shixuan walked here, clearly, he was extremely weak. His complexion was as white as a sheet of white paper. Qin Wuxuang immediately took out a 9 reversal yang pill. "Mister, this pill," Qin Shixuan smiled lightly and did not reach out to take it. He only nodded slightly. 9 reversal yang pill, it's a good pill. Put it away, I can't use it. Hey, this pill is very effective. You suffered such heavy injuries, are you still scared that we will poison you? Bao Bao could not help but feel somewhat depressed when he saw him making excuses. Even if it's poison, if it can heal my injuries, I will swallow it. Even if I drink poison to quench my thirst, I don't care. Qin Shixuan spoke with an indifferent tone, as if he had already seen through life and death. Only, behind his indifference, in the end, there was a trace of regret. As long as that poison could last me for 2 hours and let me kill a few more bastards, it would be the best. Haha. Unfortunately, with my primordial spirit shattered, I am afraid even the gods could not save me. In Qin Shixuan's eyes, some sparks of hatred flashed and there was also some unwillingness. However, this unwillingness was not a lament for his life, but the sadness of being powerless to kill the enemy. "Mister, may I ask, are you from the heavenly Emperor Qin clan?" As Qin Wuxuang looked at Qin Shixuan vividly, there was a form of miraculous resonance inwardly. The temperament displayed by Qin Shixuan made Qin Wuxuang feel such familiarity. This familiarity of being connected by blood made him resonate with a common hatred for the enemy from deep within his bones. What could be more depressing than being powerless to kill the enemy? Of course, Qin Wuxuang could empathize with Qin Shixuan's current mood. Qin Shixuan laughed. "Little one, I have been waiting for your question for a long time." Qin Wuxuang looked at Qin Shixuan with astonishment and more or less disbelief appeared on his face. Qin Shixuan said with an indifferent smile, "When you guys first came to this crest mountain, I was meditating and planning to go against the natural order to heal my injuries. Thus, I did not sense your presence. However, when I woke up from my meditative state, I already felt your presence. At the same time, I also felt the bloodline of the Qin clan inside your body. If you were not in your explosive state, perhaps I would not have sensed it. However, when you were breaking through, that feeling of being connected by blood made me resonate with you. At that time, I was already suspicious. However, in the end, I was still worried that those two groups of bastards had deliberately created some illusion. They had deliberately created this illusion while I was injured and had lost my judgment. Senior, this way, you also know that our boss is a disciple of the Qin clan? Bao Bao was slightly surprised. Qin Shixuan said with a smile, "It's not hard to confirm. The bloodline of the Qin clan is extremely unique. The purer the bloodline, the stronger the strength, the stronger the resonance between each other. By the way, I haven't asked you, young man, what is your name? Which branch of the Qin clan do you belong to? I have never seen a young man like you at the Heavenly Emperor Mountain." "I am Qin Wushuang, from the human countries." One could imagine that Qin Wushuang's answer also surprised Qin Shixuan. "From the human countries? I must say, it's somewhat unbelievable." Next, his attention stopped at the three words, Qin Wushuang. Suddenly, his expression changed as he cried out involuntarily, "Qin Wushuang." To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 475. Qin Wushuang was also shocked by Qin Wushuang's violent reaction as he nodded to confirm. "Qin Wushuang." Bao Bao laughed. "So you have also heard of our boss's name? Ha ha, it seems that the things my boss did in the human countries are truly extraordinary. Wherever he goes, people know about him." "Boss, you're absolutely right. Gold will shine wherever it goes." Bao Bao was the kind of guy that would overflow with a little sunshine or a little flood. He had always felt good about himself and started to advocate for Qin Wushuang without stopping. He had completely forgotten the dangerous situation he was in. Qin Shixuan said with a bitter smile, "I know nothing about the information from the human countries. Thus, I also know nothing about what Qin Wushuang did in the human countries." Instantly, Bao Bao felt that he had lost all his face as he smiled awkwardly. "You have never heard of my boss's name, how come you seem to be surprised? It makes me feel like you are shocked." "Shocked, it's true." Qin Shixuan smiled. "Now, not many existences could shock me. Today, even if the #1 elite warrior of the Heavenly Punishing Villa and the Sound of Thunder sect came, I would not be shocked." Then could it be that my boss is even more sensational than them? Although Bao Bao felt great about himself, he was not arrogant to that extent. Qin Shixuan's expression seemed to have fallen into deep thought. He was thinking about an extremely complicated matter. And from his expression, there were many signs of disbelief. "Senior." When Qin Wushuang saw his strange expression, he could not help but remind him. Of course, he would not forget that at this wild flame cliff, a large group of enemies were eyeing them covetously. With a focused expression, Qin Shixuan raised his hand to stop Qin Wushuang from speaking. After thinking for a while, Qin Shixuan gave a light sigh and nodded. "Young man, perhaps you should take a look at the headquarters of the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan." Qin Wushuang stared at Qin Wushuang without blinking. His expression was serious and full of expectation. Bao Bao could not help but say, "Our boss came to the Xian Yuan Mound from the human countries to take a look at the headquarters of the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan." Hearing this, Qin Shixuan was overjoyed. He slapped his thigh and said, "Good, good, good." After saying the word "good" many times in a row, Qin Shixuan's smile was already a bit choked up. His face was filled with happiness, as if he did not care about the fact that his life was about to end. "Young man, listen carefully. Every word I'm about to say is extremely important. You have to keep that in mind. If you still identify with the bloodline of the Qin clan, please do not forget a single word. Qin Shushuan's eyes emitted an extremely sincere feeling. Moreover, they were also filled with anticipation, and even somewhat worried as he gazed at Qin Wushuang. At this moment, Qin Wushuang was naturally duty-bound. Senior, if you have any requests, I will bring them to the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan, to your family. Hearing his reply, Qin Shushuan's expression instantly relaxed, and he let out a long sigh. Filled with joy, he sighed softly, "Family? My grandfather, parents, brothers, and uncles are all disciples of the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan, and they have all passed away before me. For myself, I am not married and I have no children. In terms of my flesh and blood, I don't have a single one. However, in terms of family, which disciple of the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan is not my family? In the end, the blood flowing in our veins comes from the same source. If I must bring any requests to them, there are only 4 words: never give up." Qin Shushuan's tone appeared serene. Apparently, the imminent life and death did not rob him of his dignity, his calmness, and his strength of character. When he faced death, he was as calm as when he was facing an afternoon nap. "Listen, there are only 4 words: never give up. For the Qin clan, there are not many things we can give up. Perhaps fate and fortune can give up the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan. However, the disciples of the Qin clan must never give up their bloodline and honor." When Qin Shushuan said here, his tone also became urgent. Miraculously, a trace of blush had appeared on his pale face. He continued to speak with a weak tone, "I don't have much time left. Perhaps in the next moment I will stop breathing. Thus I must strive for it. Long story short." When he said here, Qin Shushuan raised his arm and threw a fragrant sachet over. This sachet was wrapped with golden threads and appeared extremely beautiful. It also emitted a light fragrance. "Inside this storage sachet are the things those guys are looking for. You guys take it." Qin Wushuang took it in his hand and weighed it slightly. It was extremely heavy. He could not help but reveal a strange expression between his brows. "Don't feel strange, there are some extremely special metal materials and some rare things inside. Haha, don't feel strange, these things are not mine." A trace of a mischievous smile flashed across Qin Shushuan's expression. "Those things were offered as a tribute by those guys who wanted to flatter the Heavenly Punishing Villa. I heard about it, it would be a pity to not take the ill-gotten gains." Coincidentally, the Heavenly Punishing Villa has always been the sworn enemy of the Qin clan. They invited people from the Sound of Thunder sect to hunt me down. I took them around the majority of the Xian Yuan Mound and fought a dozen of battles with them. I was ambushed by the Sound of Thunder sect and my primordial spirit was injured. That's why I ended up in this situation. Qin Wushuang felt gloomy. This should be a microcosm of the rivalry between the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan and those 2 major sects for thousands of years. At this moment, Qin Wushuang was also certain that the 2 powerhouses that were making things difficult for the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan should be the Heavenly Punishing Villa and the Sound of Thunder sect. And the bounty to deal with the 100-leaf Qin clan should have come from these 2 powerhouses. When he thought here, Qin Wushuang could not help but ask, "Senior, the bounty to deal with the 100-leaf Qin clan should have been done by these 2 groups of people, right?" Lights flashed across Qin Shushuan's eyes. Apparently, Qin Wushuang's question had evoked countless memories of hatred in Qin Shushuan. He only heard Qin Shushuan say, "That's right, it was done by them." Not only that, regardless of how secretive the transportation of crystal stones that the 100-leaf Qin clan sent to support the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan, they still robbed it. They robbed the Qin clan's wealth. Could it be that we cannot rob them? There was some madness in Qin Shushuan's tone. Apparently, although he had suffered severe injuries, he did not regret it. Yes, the light of my life is about to be extinguished. However, I do not regret it. Disciples of the Qin clan died for the clan. It is not shameful to be buried with the name of the Qin clan. The reason why the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan was able to hold on until now under the joint attack of these two powerhouses was because they had thousands of disciples that were not afraid of death and dared to risk their lives. They were sending a strong signal to the enemy. The battle with these two powerhouses had greatly damaged the vitality of the Qin clan. However, their days would not be easy either. While they were consuming the Qin clan, they were also being consumed at the same speed. For the clan, we would not hesitate to die. Young man, have you thought it through? For the clan, he would not hesitate to die. This was a form of belief. In fact, inside Qin Wushuang's heart, how could he not carry this belief? For the Eastwood Qin clan, for the Stargaze Palace, he had always practiced it. Qin Wushuang fixed his gaze at Qin Shixuan. After a while, he nodded decisively. For the clan, I would not hesitate to die. Not only me, all disciples of the Qin clan in the world are the same. When I was young, my father also taught me this. Besides, all the disciples of the Qin clan I met along the way also carried this belief firmly. Senior, I promise you. Overjoyed, Qin Shixuan's eyes were filled with joy. Good, you made the right choice and took over the inheritance of the Qin clan. Young man, remember, you must go to the Heavenly Emperor Mountain. This is not a suggestion, but an advice. It's because I have a premonition that perhaps the fate of the Heavenly Emperor Qin clan, and even the fate of the Heavenly Emperor Mountain, will be tied on your shoulders. Qin Wushuang was surprised. Senior, I will not explain now. When you go to the Heavenly Emperor Mountain, everything will become clear when the time is ripe. Qin Shixuan used an unquestionable tone to stop Qin Wushuang's doubts. At the same time, he said seriously, Young man, in the end, I only have one request. Please say it. After I die, if you have a complete corpse, bring my body back to the Heavenly Emperor Mountain. This way, even if I enter the grave, I will not feel restless and will sleep peacefully. If I die without a complete corpse, bring this necklace back to the Heavenly Emperor Mountain and bury it in the ancestral grave of the Qin clan in place of my body. Qin Shixuan said with an extremely serious tone, This is my personal request. Qin Wushuang only felt a burst of bitterness in his throat, as if something had blocked his throat. For a time, he could not speak. He took that necklace with a serious expression. Qin Shixuan's expression no longer showed any trace of worry. Only calmness remained. Young man, thank you. When Qin Shixuan said here, he stood up. Now, it's time for me to do something for you guys. Qin Wushuang looked at Qin Shixuan with surprise. For a time, he did not understand what he meant. Qin Shixuan said with a smile, I have entrusted you with so much, it would only be meaningful if I can guarantee that you can leave here alive. Or else, wouldn't those words become useless nonsense? Bao Bao and Lone looked at Qin Shixuan with suspicion. Apparently, they also saw through Qin Shixuan's current weakness. With his current physical condition, most likely he could not even beat an ordinary elite warrior, not to mention those elite warriors outside who were like wolves and tigers. For those people, especially the two strongest leaders, Qin Wushuang felt that the power from them was definitely stronger than Chen Sen, an elite warrior at the profound void martial stage. In other words, most likely, that Yan Qingyun and Wu Lihu were elite warriors at the perfect void martial stage. Although they had not shattered the void and reached the exquisite mysterious boundary stage. However, such elite warriors were existences that Qin Wushuang and the others could not challenge. However, Qin Shixuan seemed to have a card up his sleeve. He took out a piece of spiritual talisman from his bosom. That spiritual talisman opened up and instantly, it transformed into the void. With a flash of red light, a giant bird with a fiery red body like a phoenix jumped out. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 476. Clearly, this giant bird was the spiritual beast sealed inside the spiritual talisman. Only, the spiritual beasts sealed by the spiritual talisman were usually puppet beasts. The so-called puppet beasts were not lifeless puppets. Instead, it meant that the spiritual perception of this spiritual beast had been taken away by the one who sealed it. Instead, it was injected with 100% tamed spiritual perception to serve the person who used the spiritual talisman. It would be impossible for any accidents to happen. Qin Shixuan pointed to this giant bird and said with a smile, "This fire cloud phoenix can take you guys through the wild flame cliff. Follow me, young man." Qin Shixuan took Qin Wushuang and the others and went deeper into the cave. After many turns, they finally arrived at a tiny exit. This exit was already halfway up the cliff. The layout of this cave was somewhat similar to the cliff cave at Eastwood Town's Great Song Mountain. If Qin Wushuang had not sensed it carefully, he almost doubted that this crest mountain was the fourth loop of the Seven Deadly Arrays formation. Do you see this exit? In a moment, you guys will fly out from here. The fire cloud phoenix will take you guys out. Remember, you must wait until I return to the top of the stone forest at the wild flame cliff. Or else you guys will not be able to slip away under their eyes. Only when I attract their attention, you guys will have hope. Senior, how can we do this? Qin Wushuang could not accept using other people's lives to cover his escape route. Qin Wushuang could not accept such a thing. This is an order. If you still recognize yourself as an offspring of the Qin clan, then execute it. From Qin Shixuan's eyes, determination and stubbornness did not allow Qin Wushuang to object. Senior, could it be we do not have any capital to fight with them? Bao Bao also felt that it would be too disloyal if they left like this. With a solemn expression, Qin Shixuan shook his head with determination. You three are only at the refined void martial stage. Any one of them would be a huge pressure for you. For your information, the two leaders are at the perfect void martial stage. The other four are at the profound void martial stage. And the transformation void martial stage is even less, only 3. Do you think that with your strength, you three have the power to fight? Qin Wushuang was speechless. He had to admit that if they were to fight, it would be like trying to smash an egg against a rock. He basically had no chance of winning, even if he had a divine weapon like the graceful spiritual bow. To the current Qin Wushuang, the perfect void martial stage was too far away. Senior, if you had a divine weapon, could it be you could not beat them? Suddenly Bao Bao asked. Qin Shixuan laughed bitterly. A divine artifact, if possible, there's no need to discuss this. Firstly, we don't have any divine weapons. Secondly, even the most powerful divine weapon in the world is useless at this moment. Because my primordial spirit is already shattered, I can't fight at all. Qin Wushuang's heart dimmed, as he already knew that Senior Qin Shixuan had indeed already established the will to die. However, even though he knew this, it was still a difficult decision for him to abandon Qin Shixuan and leave. Go, young man. If they didn't destroy my corpse, if you return to Crest Mountain in the future, then bring my corpse back to Crest Mountain. Or else, let that chain enter the Qin ancestral grave for me. Along with this strand of hair. After he had finished speaking, Qin Shixuan turned his palm into a blade and cut off a bunch of hair from his head. He handed it to Qin Wushuang solemnly. Remember, your hesitation will betray my trust. I hope you guys will leave without looking back after receiving the signal. Patting Qin Wushuang's shoulder, Qin Shixuan did not speak anymore and turned around to enter the cave. Although his back appeared stooped and his footsteps were weak, from his back and steps, there was not the slightest sign of retreat or hesitation. This was a form of calm heroism, a form of silent generosity. What was the meaning of facing death with equanimity? This was it. Qin Shixuan's footsteps were as if he was walking home. Home. When he thought here, Qin Wushuang felt a sudden pain in his heart. Each of Qin Shixuan's details, each of his actions, and each of his instructions had revealed his deep love for the Qin family. Even in death, he would not forget to return to his hometown. Strangely, Bao Bao and Lone did not speak a word. Usually, these two chatterboxes who loved to bicker and show off also did not speak a word this time. Although they were beasts, Qin Shixuan's demeanor had indeed won their admiration. Boss, don't think about it. We must not miss the opportunity that Senior Qin Shixuan has created for us. Or else, how can we fulfill his trust in the future? If you truly want to do something for Senior Qin Shixuan, then put all the sadness in your heart. Perhaps, bringing his bones back to the Qin ancestral grave was only a little wish of his. If you can lead the Qin family to prosperity, I believe it would be the best consolation for him. Although Bao Bao was small, he had a nimble mind. Of course, Qin Wushuang understood these principles. However, with Bao Bao's guidance, it had instantly brightened his mood and swept away all the haze in his heart. He must admit that Bao Bao's words were reasonable. At this moment, it would be the biggest disappointment to Senior Qin Shixuan if he were to indulge in sadness. With his primordial spirit shattered, apparently, Senior Qin Shixuan had the will to die. Bastards, what are you looking for? Qin Shixuan's voice emerged from the top of the high cliff. This time, Qin Shixuan's voice was abnormally loud and clear. However, this loud and clear voice made Qin Wushuang feel as if needles were pricking his heart. He knew that Qin Shixuan was reminding them. At the same time, he was attracting the enemy's attention and creating opportunities for them. Indeed, this cry had attracted people from all directions of the stone forest. They formed a few circles around Qin Shixuan. Qin Shixuan, let's see where you can run to this time. Wu Lihu swore with extreme malice. Qin Shixuan laughed. Good grandson, when did I say I was going to run? I am not going anywhere until I have killed enough of you bastards. Kill us? Wu Lihu said with a cold sneer. With your little capital that can be blown away by a gust of wind? I will say it one last time, bring out the thing. Qin Shixuan pointed to that wild flame cliff from afar. Do you see it? The thing is there, if you have the guts, jump down and take it. Yan Qinyan said coldly. Qin Shixuan, enough. No more acting. Regardless of how you try to hide it, you cannot change the fact that your primordial spirit is shattered. Today, it's impossible for you to escape from here. Qin Shixuan said leisurely. When did I say I was going to run? I came to this crest mountain and chose this wild flame cliff to pick a natural grave for you guys. You are still so stubborn when you are about to die. Wu Lihu swore loudly. Although this was the case, he did not dare to act recklessly. Although Qin Shixuan's primordial spirit was shattered and he no longer possessed the power to threaten them, he would never do such a thing if he were asked to be the vanguard. After all, the Sound of Thunder sect had only received an invitation. It was unnecessary for them to fight too fiercely for the things of the heavenly punishing villa. Of course, to the Sound of Thunder sect, killing the disciples of the Qin clan would always be a theme that they would never get tired of. It was a theme that could stimulate the passion of all disciples of the Sound of Thunder sect. Qin Shixuan opened both of his hands and suddenly, 2 spiritual talismans scuttled from his hands. Instantly, it seemed as if 2 long dragons had rushed out from his sleeves. They scuttled in the air and instantly transformed into 2 long dragon-like hurricanes. They whistled in all directions and for a time, sand and pebbles flew everywhere. This spiritual talisman was extraordinary. Once the wind attribute energy was unleashed, it almost enveloped the stone forest within a few dozen miles. Many stone mountains also started to shake. Some even flew in the air and crashed in all directions. The flying stone mountains instantly caused the entire wild flame cliff to fall into an uproar. There was a wild temperament as if the earth was quaking and the mountains were shaking. Ha ha, heavenly punishing, sound of thunder, the bastards of your two sects. Today I will activate the volcano of the wild flame cliff, and everyone will be buried in this world of fire. Qin Shushuan laughed wantonly and his tone was filled with madness. Instantly, those 9 people were greatly shocked as they all flew towards the sky. Apparently, they were extremely nervous at Qin Shushuan's threat. Yan Qingyun and Wu Lihu remained calm amidst the chaos. Both transformed into 2 rays of light and waved the weapons in their hands continuously. They formed a few rapid attacks and went to greet Qin Shushuan. Let's go. Almost at the same time as Qin Shushuan laughed loudly, Qin Wushuang activated the fire cloud phoenix and immediately charged out of the cave. The scorching high temperature almost made their bones melt. Their hair, their skin, every inch of their body was tested and destroyed by this merciless high temperature. One had to know that this was only the upper middle part of the cliff. The fire cloud phoenix also did not fly upwards. Instead, it made a detour towards the east and left the wild flame cliff. 4 rays of light, like 4 meteors falling from the sky, all greeted Qin Shushuan's physical body. Boom! Golden light shot in all directions. Although Qin Shushuan's physical body also had a protective spiritual talisman, when the 4 rays of light attacked, the golden light shattered and the defensive power of the spiritual talisman was instantly broken. With the defensive power broken, Qin Shushuan's physical body naturally had no way of resisting this wild combined attack. Only a loud boom could be heard. Qin Shushuan's body instantly shattered in all directions. It was like a shattered mirror with shards flying in all directions. In midair, Yan Qingyun and Wu Lihu both felt a wave of relief. Dead, he was finally dead. Qin Shushuan was dead. Finally, this great threat would no longer pose any threat to them. And the pupils of one of the elite warriors of the heavenly punishing villa suddenly contracted rapidly. He pointed towards the far east. A black shadow was currently quickly disappearing into the void. Elder Yan, what is that? Someone is escaping. Could it be Qin Shushuan's accomplice? Yan Qingyun and Wu Lihu's gazes were also immediately attracted by the black dot in the distance. Looking from afar, the speed of the black dot actually made them slightly surprised. Chase. Yan Qingyun and Wu Lihu had this thought almost at the same time. Both of them sprinted forward. Their figures in midair were like eagles swooping down. Their speed was extremely fast. Wu Lihu's arms shook and a bow and arrow appeared in his hands. He said to Yan Qingyun, "Brother Yan, lend me a hand." They knew that at this moment they were too far away from the enemy. If they sprinted over, considering the terrain of the wild flame cliff, it would be difficult to catch up. Only by catching the enemy from a distance and combining the power of the two, would they have a chance of keeping the enemy. If you want to know what will happen, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 477. Boss, someone discovered us. Bao Bao had good eyesight. He turned around and saw the situation behind him. 2 elite warriors at the perfect void martial stage were already dashing over with all their strength. Only, the speed of the fire cloud phoenix was no less than the elite warriors at the perfect void martial stage. Between each other, they always maintained a distance that could not be closed nor widened. Not good. Suddenly, Bao Bao's pupils shrank because he clearly saw that at this moment, Wu Lihu was piling on top of Yan Qingyun's body. Suddenly, a wave of yellow light shot out. Like a wave of gigantic pushing force, it had ejected Wu Lihu's body. Boom! Instantly, Wu Lihu's body shot over like an arrow at twice the speed. The most fatal part was that Wu Lihu extended his arms. With one hand holding the bow, the other hand knocked an arrow, whoosh! One arrow, another arrow. Although that bow and arrow was not as heaven-defying as the graceful spiritual bow, under the use of an elite warrior at the perfect void martial stage, it still had the power to swallow and spit out wind and thunder. It had the power to destroy the world. That arrow carried an imposing manner that could shatter the sky as it shot forward. In the blink of an eye, it had arrived before them. Bao Bao immediately urged the fire cloud phoenix downward. Whoosh! That arrow had almost whizzed past their ears and shot toward the cliff on the opposite side. Now there was a 90-degree turn on the cliff. With a boom, the arrow had shot into the cliff and instantly, a giant hole had sunk into the cliff. The hole was as wide as a few acres of land. Inwardly, Qin Wushuang was shocked. This power was on par with a bomb from his former world. This arrow is only a warning. Wu Lihu's voice sounded coldly. After 3 arrows, if you don't stop, I will let you guys experience the feeling of 10,000 arrows piercing your heart. While he spoke, he grabbed a dozen arrows with his hand and placed them on the bow. These arrows seemed to be sticky as they stuck to the bowstring. Boss! Bao Bao's heart sank. This person has superb archery skills. The situation is not looking good. Although Qin Shixuan's plan was flawless, taking into account all the favorable and unfavorable conditions, he never would have thought that this Wu Lihu still had this trump card up his sleeve. Jimo's eyes turned red. The power of one arrow is already so strong. With so many arrows, it's impossible to dodge. This was the truth. Although Wu Lihu had shot 3 arrows in a row, he had shot them one after the other. He had not used a rapid shooting method. His goal was to force Qin Wushuang and the others to stop. Wu Lihu's goal was the things that Qin Shixuan had snatched away. Therefore, he had yet to display his strongest archery skill. Boss, why don't we just go back and fight it out with him? Although Lone was facing a life-and-death situation, his blood and qi were not weak. He was not afraid of death. No! Bao Bao denied it. If we go back, none of the 3 of us can defeat someone at the perfect void martial stage. Qin Wushuang nodded. Bao Bao, I will switch places with you guys, I will be at the back. Bao Bao said urgently. Boss, at this time, at most you can block 1 arrow from the back. You cannot block all those arrows for us. Lone yelled. Then I will be at the back. My defense is stronger. My skin is thick. Qin Wushuang gave a long sigh. The destructive power of the perfect void martial stage is not only limited to physical attacks. Their attacks will certainly penetrate the primordial spirit. Especially since we have just formed our primordial spirit. We cannot withstand the destruction of the perfect void martial stage. Bao Bao, urge the fire cloud phoenix and fly down. Boss, although this fire cloud phoenix is a puppet battle beast, it also has a little bit of consciousness. The lower we go, the greater the heat. Even if it is the fire cloud phoenix, it cannot endure it. If we go down, we will all be melted. Even if we are melted, it's better than dying at the hands of these bastards. Lone gave a long sigh. Suddenly, Bao Bao said, Boss, Senior Qin Shixuan created an opportunity for us and sacrificed himself. Now, perhaps, it's time for me and Second to sacrifice ourselves for you. Second, if we let Boss go alone, would you be willing? The purple flame electric beast harumphed and said, Since the moment I was unsealed by Boss, it was destined that my life existed for him. Isn't it just death? They are not even afraid of humans. How could us spiritual beasts lose to them? Just when Qin Wushuang was about to speak, Bao Bao stopped him. Boss, it's time to make a decision. If you don't go, all 3 of us will die. If you go, perhaps you can live. You can avenge us in the future. Qin Wushuang said in a low voice. You guys go, I will cover you. Bao Bao said miserably. Boss, we can't leave. We don't have the ability to ride the air and cannot fly alone. Only you have this skill. We will continue to ride the fire cloud phoenix and drop down into the abyss. You will continue to fly ahead. The further down you go, the thicker the smoke will be and the more it will cover your escape. Boss, go quickly. Go. Lone also roared in a low voice. In the 2 lifetimes that Qin Wushuang had lived, he had never had the experience of abandoning his friend. Now, although he was urged by Bao Bao and Lone, he remained unmoved. Second, third, when we entered the Xian Yuan Mound, we already said that we will always be together. We will make our way together and build our reputation together. Qin Wushuang said slowly. I can't do it if you want me to keep you guys. Bao Bao said urgently. Boss, don't forget, your family, your sect, and the Qin clan are all waiting for you. While they were arguing, Wu Lihu's voice came from afar. Humph, if you guys keep flying down, unless you fall off the cliff, don't think about evading my attack. I will count to 10, if you guys don't slow down, prepare to have a tragic cremation at this wild flame cliff. Bao Bao and Lone looked at each other. At this moment, they had a tacit understanding. At the same time, they extended their hand and pushed Qin Wushuang's shoulder. They shouted in a low voice, Boss, go! Caught off guard, Qin Wushuang was pushed by these 2 waves of power. His body flew out directly and pushed forward at a rapid speed. Naturally, the pair of wings on his back opened. Almost at this moment, Bao Bao and Lone turned the fire cloud phoenix and dashed towards Wu Lihu's direction. Wu Lihu's expression changed as he said with a sneer, You guys are digging your own graves. Lone swore, Grandson, you want to kill us? In your next life. After he had finished, he and Bao Bao extended their palms and hit the 2 wings of the fire cloud phoenix directly. Feeling the pain, the fire cloud phoenix's wings instantly froze and it could not exert any strength. In the middle of the air, it fell headfirst down the high cliff at a rapid speed. Naturally, the speed of its free fall was extremely fast. One only saw a flash of fire below and the monstrous flame engulfed the figure of Bao Bao and Lone directly like a hungry and thirsty beast. Qin Wushuang only heard the miserable cry of the fire cloud phoenix and knew that something was wrong. A wave of sharp pain emerged from his chest, as if someone had pierced his chest with a sharp blade. The pain was incomparable. Crest Mountain. Not even in Qin Wushuang's dreams did he expect that this Crest Mountain would become the place where he would part with Bao Bao and Lone. This unexpected disaster was completely out of his expectation. Bao Bao and Lone's suicidal fall from the cliff had also left Wu Lihu dumbstruck. He put away his bow and looked down with a blank expression. He only saw countless flames scuttling up, and the red light was like a ferocious beast that had been suppressed for tens and thousands of years. Even someone as strong as Wu Lihu felt waves of throbbing and could not help but have goosebumps all over his body. While he was in a daze, that Yan Qinyun also caught up and asked, "What's wrong?" Wu Lihu shook his head with a bitter smile. "They went down." "They went down?" Yan Qinyun looked at the raging fire below with disbelief. It was like a boiling furnace that could erupt the destructive hellfire at any moment. Each of these people of the Qin clan is not afraid of death. Wu Lihu was deeply moved. He did not have the slightest courage to jump down from such a place, even if there were countless people chasing after them. "Are you sure that group of people are also disciples of the Qin clan? If they are not disciples of the Qin clan, who would work for Qin Shushuan?" Wu Lihu asked back. "That might not be the case. When we chased after Qin Shushuan until here, we did not see any helpers along the way." Inwardly, Yan Qinyun felt extremely vexed. Although Qin Shushuan had died, they did not get the goods. And Qin Shushuan's death was not a loss. The number of casualties from the heavenly punishing villa and the sound of thunder sect was enough for Qin Shushuan to die in peace. Wu Lihu was even more depressed. After running around for such a long time, they had wasted so much manpower and time. In the end, they had gained nothing. Per the agreement between the Sound of Thunder sect and the Heavenly Punishing Villa, they would get 30% of the goods they had recovered. For this 30%, the Sound of Thunder sect had sent elite warriors to help. However, in the end, it was like drawing water with a sieve. One could imagine the disappointment in his heart. And Wu Lihu's attention was focused on the Fire Cloud Phoenix. Bao Bao and Lone had hidden their moves and pushed Qin Wushuang out with the smoke that filled the sky. However, in the end, it had escaped Wu Lihu's eyes. When Bao Bao and Lone had returned to the Wild Flame Cliff, Wu Lihu was even more shocked by this scene. Naturally, he did not have the time to think about anything else. Qin Wushuang felt as if a knife had pierced his heart as he flew forward numbly. He did not know how long he had flown, and finally, he had flown out of the territory of the Crest Mountain. And Qin Wushuang was not in the mood to pay attention to the terrain. His mind was in a mess, and he only had Bao Bao and Lone's smiling faces. Everything that had happened in the past vividly emerged in his mind. However, at this moment, Qin Wushuang was powerless. Inwardly, he could only pray, "Bao Bao, Lone, you guys will be fine. You will be fine. Don't forget, we have not fulfilled the promise we made when we entered the Xian Yuan Mound." When he thought here, Qin Wushuang spat out a mouthful of blood with a wah sound. Flying at a rapid speed at the Wild Flame Cliff had pushed Qin Wushuang's primordial spirit to its limit. Plus, he had just entered the refined void martial stage and had not had the time to consolidate his strength. Because Bao Bao and Lone had fallen off the cliff, his mind had received a violent blow and caused great damage to his primordial spirit. Qin Wushuang only felt that the wings on his back were becoming less and less obedient and his consciousness was becoming more and more blurred. He barely managed to land on a lower ground. Just as he had landed, his mind was shaken violently. He did not know where he had landed and he had fainted. To be continued. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 478. After 3 days and 3 nights of flying, Qin Wushuang could not believe how much distance he had traveled. After an unknown amount of time, Qin Wushuang slowly regained consciousness. As soon as he regained consciousness, he sat up abruptly. Then, with a light snort, he felt a wave of intense pain from his chest and back. The most fatal part was that there was a burning sensation below his lower abdomen. The pain almost made him grimace in pain. Shaking his head, Qin Wushuang's vision gradually regained clarity. It blocked the light coming in from outside the window. Then, he started to size up the surrounding environment. This was a straw hut. The area inside the hut was not big and the furnishings were also simple and crude. There was only a small bed he was lying on. Next to the bed, there was a small table and 2 bamboo chairs. These were the furnishings of the entire room. Qin Wushuang stopped his gaze on that bamboo chair and thought, "What is this place? The owner has a good state of mind. This bamboo chair is so exquisitely woven. He is indeed an elegant person." He looked outside and saw that there was a small stove in the corridor with a fire burning. On top of that stove there was a pot. Apparently something was being cooked. Dense green smoke was also emitting from the stove. Qin Wushuang stood up and felt the situation of his body. He realized that the injuries on his body had gotten better. Only inside his dantian, that newly formed primordial spirit was still in an extremely weak state. Qin Wushuang knew that for sure. It was because he had activated his dantian excessively. Although he did not calculate, he had indeed flown for a long time before he lost consciousness. "Bao Bao, Lone, are you guys okay?" Qin Wushuang thought silently. In the end, he did not believe that the Wild Flame Cliff would be the final destination for these 3 brothers. He also did not believe that Bao Bao and his brothers would have such a short life. Regardless, Bao Bao had the bloodline of the ancient spiritual monkey. How could he have such a short life with the bloodline of the divine clan? Just as he was feeling sad, suddenly, his ears twitched as he heard small footsteps coming from outside the house. These footsteps were not slow, yet they landed lightly. Apparently, it was a girl walking. Qin Wushuang raised his head and looked outside the door. He saw a young girl dressed in green walking down from the slope diagonally opposite with a basket. From the way this young girl dressed, she was a village girl. However, when he observed her temperament and eyes, she seemed to have walked out of a painting. She was so pure that one would feel that she was a natural spirit. When that young girl dressed in green saw Qin Wushuang, she was stunned. Then, 2 red clouds floated across her face. She slowed down her footsteps and put the basket in the corner. "Young girl, is this your home?" Seeing this young girl, Qin Wushuang, of course, Qin Wushuang, Qin Wushuang, of course. That young girl's Wushuang. He walked to the side of the stove, took a piece of cloth used as a cushion, and opened the lid of the jar. He took a look and smelled it. Wushuang. He turned around and picked up a fan. Then, he placed it beside the fire and fanned it continuously. Throughout the whole process, the young girl's face was red. Qin Wushuang had a series of questions in his mind, but seeing this young girl's shy expression, he did not continue to ask. He lifted his foot and walked outside, wanting to take in some fresh air. "You!" The young girl stood up and looked at Qin Wushuang with concern. Although her cheeks were red, her eyes were as clear as a spring. Qin Wushuang showed a puzzled expression. "Young girl, what's wrong? It's windy outside." The young girl's voice was very low, and she even stuttered a little. Qin Wushuang smiled. "Don't be afraid. I'll walk around and take a look." Seeing Qin Wushuang turn around and leave, the young girl chased after him for a few steps and stopped. "There are wild beasts in this valley." Qin Wushuang saw this young girl's serious face, especially her clear eyes. She did not have any worldly desires. Clearly, she had good intentions. She was worried that his body had not recovered. Feeling something, Qin Wushuang stopped his footstep. He stood outside the corridor and looked around. This was a deep and serene valley. As for the straw house, it was built in an extremely simple and crude manner. Behind the thatched house, there was a gurgling brook. Across the brook, there was a village. This was a spectacle. On the other side of the brook, there were villages and farmhouses everywhere, but on this side there was only one thatched house, giving people a feeling of seclusion. Seeing that Qin Wushuang did not leave, the young girl was relieved. She walked into the house, took a bowl, lifted the pot on the stove, and poured the boiled herbs into the bowl. Qin Wushuang sniffed and smelled the fragrance of herbs. He could not help but look back and see the young girl holding the bowl, walking towards him. Qin Wushuang was surprised. "For me to drink?" That young girl nodded. "After you drink the medicine, your wounds will heal faster." Just when Qin Wushuang wanted to refuse, when he saw the young girl's serious expression, he could not bear to disobey her. He took the bowl, blew on it a few times, and drank it all. On the side, that young girl revealed a trace of a smile when she saw Qin Wushuang had finished drinking the medicine. Apparently, she was also very happy. "Thank you, young girl. Can I ask, what is this place?" Qin Wushuang looked at the tall mountains surrounding this valley. They were all extremely high, connecting the sky to the clouds. Clearly, this was not an ordinary place. This place is called the Bowl Valley. Bowl Valley. Qin Wushuang had studied the terrain of the Xian Yuan Mound. However, on those maps, there was no indication of a place like the Bowl Valley. Apparently, this Bowl Valley was not an extremely important place, or else it would have been impossible for it not to have a name on the map. The Bowl Valley, which prefecture is in charge of this place? Qin Wushuang asked again. That young girl was somewhat at a loss. Apparently, she did not understand the meaning of Qin Wushuang's words. When Qin Wushuang saw her expression, he could not help but feel somewhat depressed. It seemed that this bowl valley was so small that the government was not even interested in keeping statistics. This way, it should be a paradise that drifted away from the mainstream. When that young girl saw Qin Wushuang's somewhat disappointed expression, she felt somewhat apologetic. However, she could not help and could only take Qin Wushuang's empty bowl. She walked to the little stream to wash it. Qin Wushuang knew that most likely, this young girl had lived here for a long time and knew nothing about the outside world. Looking at her untainted eyes, it was so pure that it made one's heart ache. Qin Wushuang felt embarrassed to continue to ask questions to prevent her from feeling embarrassed and guilty if she could not answer. He could only stand on the side and watch that young girl tidy up inside and out. In total, there were only 3 thatched huts. One of them was where Qin Wushuang had lived, and the other one was in front of a giant medicine cabinet. The last one had its door lightly closed. It should be this young girl's room. As for the kitchen and the firewood room, they could only build a simple shed in the corridor. As Qin Wushuang looked at the scene before him, for a time, he felt bitter inwardly. Such simple life had appeared in a forbidden spiritual zone like the Xian Yuan Mound. For your information, to the human countries, the Xian Yuan Mound was definitely a place filled with blood and slaughter. Unexpectedly, there was such a peaceful place. From each of the movements of this young girl, clearly, she was not a martial artist. However, this young girl was quite capable. In a moment, she had prepared a table of food. Although the dishes were simple and there were only 4 plates, they were all simple dishes. Only, with the help of this young girl's cooking skills, these simple dishes had an extraordinary color and fragrance that whetted one's appetite. Time to eat. Initially, that young girl wanted to call out to him, but she did not know how to address him. Qin Wushuang nodded kindly. My surname is Qin. Yes, brother Qin, let's eat. That young girl scooped 2 bowls of rice and 2 pairs of chopsticks. 1 pair of chopsticks and 1 bowl of rice were placed next to Qin Wushuang. Only after Qin Wushuang had sat down did that young girl sit down. Young girl, it's just the 2 of us eating? Where is your family? Qin Wushuang could not help but ask. Only my grandfather, he has passed away. That young girl's voice was calm. Even when talking about life and death, her tone was indifferent. Oh. Qin Wushuang gave a light sigh and did not know what to say. He could only keep his head down and eat with all his strength. He must say that the cooking skills of this young girl had greatly whetted Qin Wushuang's appetite. After eating 4 bowls of rice, Qin Wushuang finally felt satisfied. When he saw that young girl looking at him with a smile, he put down the bowl and chopsticks and laughed at himself. Young girl's cooking skills are very good. I unconsciously ate 2 more bowls. That young girl smiled lightly. There is still a lot of rice. However, Qin Wushuang did not know that the villagers here could easily eat 7 or 8 bowls of this kind of bowl. After eating, Qin Wushuang realized that he should do something instead of just standing at the side as a spectator. He immediately cleaned up the bowls and chopsticks. That young girl hurriedly said, Big brother Qin, let me do this. Qin Wushuang smiled embarrassedly, looked around, and volunteered. Then I will chop the firewood. Big brother Qin, there is enough firewood, you should rest. Qin Wushuang did not know whether to laugh or cry. Young girl, in any case, let me do something. Otherwise, I will feel like a good-for-nothing who only eats and does not work. Just as they were talking, a loud voice from the other side of the stream shouted, Dr. Shui, quickly come and take a look, old Mo's wife has collapsed again. That young girl heard the shout and was slightly surprised. She hurriedly put down the work in her hands and walked to the pharmacy. She took out a bamboo medicine box and said to Qin Wushuang, Big brother Qin, you rest here, I will go and take a look. Young girl, you are a doctor? It is the medical skills passed down by my grandfather, that young girl said and hurriedly rushed to the other side. Who would have known that it was high tide at this time? The water of the stream had already overflowed the bamboo bridge, so when that young girl crossed the bridge, she had to be extremely careful. She spread her hands to both sides and walked step by step towards the other side. In Qin Wushuang's eyes, it was like an acrobat walking on a tightrope in his previous life. Qin Wushuang's heart was moved. He floated over and gently touched that young girl's arm. His feet touched the water and landed on the opposite bank. That young girl was stunned. She looked at Qin Wushuang's expression with a bit of astonishment. "I will accompany you to take a look," Qin Wushuang said sincerely. The young girl thought for a while and softly said, "Yes." Her lips moved, wanting to ask something, but in the end, she did not ask. This village had about a few hundred families and a population of less than 3,000. Judging from their attire, they should be the most ordinary mountain people. The kind that relied on the mountain to live off the mountain and the kind that relied on the water to live off the water. The sick person was a 30-something-year-old woman. At this moment, her face was pale and she was lying on a wooden plank. Her breathing was rapid, as if she could stop breathing at any time. Seeing that young girl, everyone looked as if they had seen their savior. "Dr. Shui, quickly come and take a look." That young girl walked over and felt her pulse. Her eyebrows slightly wrinkled. A moment later, that young girl asked, "Sister-in-law Mo, did you go to the Tortoise King Mountain?" Speaking of the Ghost King Mountain, all the mountain people's faces changed at the same time, as if they had seen a ghost. Their expressions were full of fear. To be continued. If you want to know the future, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. Chapter 479. The village woman was originally unconscious, but when she heard the words, Tortoise King Mountain, her entire body convulsed. Her eyes suddenly opened, but her pupils rapidly contracted. It was a complete reaction from excessive shock. The village woman's hands were clawing at the air, and her teeth were chattering. In front of the village woman's bed, a mountain man cried bitterly, "Dr. Shui, can my wife be saved?" The young girl's face was gloomy, and her expression was apologetic. Clearly, there was no cure. "No!" The mountain man, Mo Laosi, cried out in grief. He knelt in front of the bed and kowtowed to the young girl. "Dr. Shui, I beg you. You must have a way to save my child's mother. I beg you." The young girl had a sorrowful expression. "Big brother Mo, you shouldn't have let sister-in-law go to Tortoise King Mountain." Qin Wushuang, who was standing behind the young girl, had a change of expression. He suddenly walked to the bed and grabbed the village woman's wrist. He felt her pulse and used his divine sense to check the village woman's pulse. "What are you doing? Who is he?" When the surrounding people saw Qin Wushuang suddenly appear, they all cursed. Clearly, they were very surprised by the appearance of a stranger like Qin Wushuang. Qin Wushuang didn't wait for these people to speak. He pointed at the village woman's body several times in the air. He said to the young girl, "Miss, where is Tortoise King Mountain?" The young girl was slightly surprised. "Big brother Qin, you also know medicine?" "She isn't sick, nor is she poisoned by the miasma in the mountains. It's obvious that she has been poisoned with a goo." Qin Wushuang sighed softly. "Goo?" The young girl didn't quite understand. Qin Wushuang didn't know how to explain it. Goo techniques were a mysterious method to begin with. It was very difficult to explain the existence of such things with pharmacological theory. Yes, once poisoned with a goo technique, unless the person who poisoned her is found, even 100 medicines won't be able to save her. Has anyone in the village shown such symptoms before? As soon as Qin Wushuang asked this question, instantly, he attracted the gazes of admiration from the surrounding people. One by one, they knelt on the ground. "Young master from the outside, in recent years, more than 10 people have died mysteriously in our village." The young girl added, "They all went to the Tortoise King Mountain. That place is very dangerous." The Tortoise King Mountain was about a few hundred miles away from this bowl valley. The mountain people here would often search for some mountain goods in the surrounding deep mountains. Although the Tortoise King Mountain was relatively far away, it was the place with the most abundant mountain goods and the easiest place to earn money. Some of the aboriginals had gone to the Tortoise King Mountain and were lucky enough to succeed once or twice. The things they obtained could be sold at very high prices in the towns outside. Therefore, even if it was a dangerous place, these people were very enthusiastic about going to the Tortoise King Mountain to seek wealth. Qin Wushuang frowned and said, "I temporarily used some method to suppress the movement of the goo in her body. However, if we can't find the person who cast the goo, this goo will act up sooner or later." Hearing Qin Wushuang's words, Mo Laosi turned around and knelt down at Qin Wushuang. He could not stop begging, "Young master from the outside, I beg you to be kind, I beg you." Qin Wushuang nodded. "I will go to the Tortoise King Mountain to take a look. Don't worry, it will not be a problem to hold on for 7 days. I will try my best to find the owner of the goo in this time." That young girl moved her mouth as if she wanted to say something. However, under such circumstances, as a doctor with the heart of a parent, she could not say anything to stop him. Qin Wushuang followed this young girl and returned to the thatched hut on the other side of the river. "Brother Qin, are you really going to the Tortoise King Mountain?" that young girl asked. Normally, with Qin Wushuang's current situation, it was not appropriate for him to meddle in other people's business. However, he had just experienced a life and death parting with Bao Bao. When he saw the mournful and hopeless expression of Mo Laosi's family, his heart throbbed. Also, he saw that the tall mountains surrounding this bowl valley had a solemn atmosphere and did not seem to be a nameless place. Thus, he also wanted to explore. Most importantly, he must find a way out of the valley and get back on the right track. When that young girl saw Qin Wushuang mumbling to himself in silence, she gave a faint sigh and carried the medicine box on her back. "I will go with my dear brother." "You are going too?" Qin Wushuang was shocked. "I can go alone." That young girl said with a determined tone, "Brother Qin, I am a doctor. If the mountain people got poisoned at the Tortoise King Mountain, I can find the corresponding medicinal herbs according to the source of the poison. It will be easier to deal with it." "But didn't you say that the Tortoise King Mountain is dangerous?" That young girl nodded and her tone remained as calm as water. "I am a doctor, it is dangerous to go into the mountain to pick medicinal herbs. However, those wild beasts in the mountain all let me go when they saw me." Wild beasts let you go? He had never heard of such a thing. Could it be that the wild beasts surrounding this bowl valley were all vegetarians, or cultivated their bodies and minds? How could they let go of a defenseless human? "Brother Qin, I am not lying to you." Qin Wushuang found it inconceivable and said with a bitter smile, "Maybe I am ignorant and inexperienced, or maybe there is something special on you." At this point, Qin Wushuang's tone was also determined. "But this time, you really don't have to go. I promise you, that is definitely not the poisonous gas of the mountain, it is a man-made goo poison. This kind of poison is not useful to doctors. It can only be removed if the person who used the goo poison dies." "You want to kill someone?" That young girl's expression instantly changed and she lightly bit her lips. She was really a girl made of water. Qin Wushuang looked at this young girl and sighed inwardly. This was really a girl who was completely untainted by the secular world, a hidden spirit. Those who use this kind of goo poison to harm people are bad people. If the bad people don't die, the good people will suffer. Qin Wushuang could only patiently explain. However, this kind of explanation could not convince such a pure and introverted young girl doctor with a heart as compassionate as a snow lotus. That young girl was in a daze. Suddenly, she thought of something and said, "Brother Qin, you are injured." Qin Wushuang said, I will slowly recuperate for a few days, then I will be fine. With Qin Wushuang's foundation, after being baptized by the divine light, his body's functions were very strong, so his recovery ability was also very strong. Because of excessive use of the martial arts, the damage to his primordial spirit, although serious, was not fatal. He only needed to recuperate. After resting in this thatched hut for a night, Qin Wushuang listened to the mountain wind and the sound of the brook. He slept very soundly and sweetly. In this place, like a paradise, all the killing and grudges of the outside world slowly fell asleep in the bottom of his heart. The next day, the sun shone through the window early. The sound of birds and the fragrance of flowers woke Qin Wushuang up from his resting state. Qin Wushuang felt his dantian. After a day and night of rest, his injuries were indeed mostly healed. Qin Wushuang was already used to his recovery ability. Since his debut, he had been injured many times, but his body's strong recovery ability allowed his injuries to heal very quickly. Miss, in which direction is the Tortoise King Mountain? After breakfast, Qin Wushuang asked. Brother Qin, are you really not going to take me there? Yes, miss, please believe me. This time, you really don't have to go. The young girl took a deep breath and nodded with some disappointment. Go straight to the mouth of the valley and head southwest. It is a few 100 miles. When you reach the boundary, you will see a shape that looks like a giant tortoise. That is the Tortoise King Mountain. Okay, I will go and take a look. Qin Wushuang smiled at the young girl and said, I have disturbed you these days. Miss, I will definitely repay you for saving me. The young girl shook her head. Brother Qin, I am a doctor. It is my duty to save people. To you, you are saving the dying and healing the injured, but to me, you are saving my life. Miss, I will take my leave. Qin Wushuang cupped his hands and walked towards the mouth of the valley with large strides. Brother Qin. Seeing Qin Wushuang take a few steps, the young girl hurriedly shouted. Qin Wushuang turned his head. Yes. Brother Qin, my surname is Shui. You can call me Roland. After the young girl finished speaking, her face flushed red. She ran into the house and closed the door. Leaning against the door, her whole body felt hot. Her throat was dry and astringent, and her chest was rapidly moving up and down. It was obvious that she was very shy. Roland, the scenery in this empty valley is unique. Qin Wushuang sighed softly and walked out of the valley. Only then did he spread his wings and quickly flew towards the direction of the Tortoise King Mountain. Even if he did not have wings, Qin Wushuang would not need long to cover a few 100 miles. With this pair of retractable wings, it was extremely easy. After a few ups and downs, he could see the legendary Tortoise King Mountain. This Tortoise King Mountain indeed looked like a huge tortoise crawling there. However, even though it looked like a huge tortoise, the altitude of this mountain was not low. Compared to the surrounding mountain ranges, it had the grandeur of a group of smaller mountains. Looking around, there were actually quite a few villages in the vicinity of the Tortoise King Mountain. However, these villages were all around the Tortoise King Mountain and were very far apart from each other. The distance between each of the villages was a few 100 miles. Qin Wushuang looked down from a high vantage point and had a very good view. Looking at these villages, 8 or 9 out of 10 had already been abandoned and became a land of death. Looking from a high vantage point, it looked very dilapidated and desolate. Qin Wushuang looked at the Tortoise King Mountain again and felt that the atmosphere was very solemn. There was no evil aura at all. He felt very strange. This Tortoise King Mountain is very majestic. It doesn't look like a place with dense evil aura at all. Why are 8 or 9 out of 10 of the surrounding villages abandoned? Could it be that one can't live around such a place? Qin Wushuang retracted his wings and stopped at the foot of the mountain. Having just arrived at an unfamiliar place, Qin Wushuang was not in a hurry to go deeper. Instead, he followed the mountain path and explored upwards step by step. After walking for a few sections of the mountain path, a woodcutter suddenly turned in front of him. He was carrying a bundle of firewood on his back and humming a tune. Seeing Qin Wushuang, the woodcutter first stopped and looked at Qin Wushuang with a very guarded gaze. Qin Wushuang said, "Brother woodcutter, which village are you from?" The woodcutter subconsciously touched the axe at his waist and stammered, "Why do you care which village I'm from? Who are you to dare to come to this Tortoise King mountain? Are you not afraid of death? You dare to come here to gather firewood, can't I come here to hunt?" Qin Wushuang asked back. The woodcutter was startled and hid at the side of the mountain path. "Then you go first." Qin Wushuang did not bat an eyelid and slowly walked upwards. When he arrived in front of the woodcutter raised his arm slightly. Almost at the same time, Qin Wushuang's right elbow lightly bumped into the woodcutter's shoulder. The woodcutter groaned and the faint blue light in his hand suddenly extinguished. His 5 fingers clenched into a fist and he took a dozen steps back. He looked at Qin Wushuang warily. To be continued. If you want to know what will happen next, please go to www.chidian.com. There are more chapters. Support the author, support legal reading. Chapter 480. Qin Wushuang sneered. As expected of the Tortoise King Mountain. Even the woodcutter is so powerful? The woodcutter was lightly bumped by Qin Wushuang. Although it was not a solid hit, it still caused the blood in his body to roll. This person clearly did not expect that the person in front of him would be so powerful. Just now, when he raised his arm, he wanted to silently make a small move. He did not expect that his move would be broken by the other party's casual elbow. "Who the hell are you?" The woodcutter's face was full of hostility. He looked at Qin Wushuang as if his eyes were about to spit fire. Qin Wushuang asked back, "And who are you?" The woodcutter said in an evil tone, "Who I am is none of your business. This Tortoise King Mountain is now our territory. Friend, if you are an outsider, you should know the rules." "Your territory? Does this Tortoise King Mountain have an owner?" "Even if it didn't have one before, it does now. Friend, seeing that your skills are not ordinary, you should be someone with a great background. This Tortoise King Mountain is not a place with good feng shui. You don't have to fight with us over it, right?" The woodcutter sounded like he was showing weakness, but how could Qin Wushuang not hear the resentment in his voice? "So, this Tortoise King Mountain is your territory? Then I would like to ask, what sect are you from?" Qin Wushuang asked coldly. "Friend, aren't you asking too much?" The woodcutter's eyes were somewhat ruthless. He suddenly pursed his lips and a sharp whistle soared into the sky. "Calling for friends." Qin Wushuang's face turned cold, but he did not retreat. He grabbed the overlord breaking formation spear in his hand and strode towards the mountain path, ignoring the woodcutter. The woodcutter below stared at Qin Wushuang's departing figure with vicious eyes. He gritted his teeth and suddenly waved his hands. 2 gloomy rays of light rushed out from his palms and turned into a ball of blue mist, enveloping Qin Wushuang's back. Qin Wushuang seemed to have eyes on the back of his head. Suddenly, he did a somersault and flipped his body in the air. Then, he raised his index finger and middle finger and pointed 3 times. The coagulated sword consisted of the Shangyang sword and the Zhongchong sword. Sword Qi flashed and shot into the woodcutter's chest. The sword Qi shot out and pierced through the woodcutter's chest and back, nailing him to the side of the mountain wall. The woodcutter didn't even have time to react before his life was taken away by the sword Qi that was as fast as a ghost. This coagulated sword was once Qin Wushuang's strongest attack. Now that he had reached the void refinement stage, the power of the coagulated sword was naturally even more impressive. Qin Wushuang had not used this sword art for a long time. This coagulated sword also had many levels. The first stage was the void sword. The second realm was the solid sword. The third stage was the gang sword. For these 3 stages, after Qin Wushuang had entered the perfect stage of the spiritual martial force, he had reached perfection. However, currently, Qin Wushuang was at the refined void martial stage. Naturally, the gang sword stage of this coagulated sword was no longer suitable for Qin Wushuang. It did not match with Qin Wushuang's current stage. And according to Qin Wushuang's memory of the coagulated sword, the 4th stage was the sword soul. Fortunately, regardless of how the stage of the coagulated sword increased, the method and path of training remained the same. It was only a different stage in the same cycle. Thus, there was no need for any tricks to train this 4th stage. He only needed to use the same method and a new stage to train. In the future, he would be able to form the sword soul. Once this sword soul was formed, one could imagine the increase in attack power. Most importantly, this coagulated sword was extremely beneficial for close combat. Compared to using weapons to kill, this sword technique performed by using one's fingers had the advantage of being nimble, free, and quick to change. For any sword technique, the sword was an external object. Even if it was said to be one with the sword, it was only an exaggeration. From a physiological point of view, the fingers were a part of the body and were directly controlled by the spiritual consciousness, and using weapons was an external part of the body. Regardless of how well one trained, how well one cooperated, and how perfect the fusion was, it could not be compared to a part of the body. This was also the biggest advantage of the coagulated sword. Now, Qin Wushuang had also brought forth new ideas for this coagulated sword. He kept merging the heart and sword intentions of the coagulated sword into actual combat with the weapons. For example, his hegemon breaking formation spear and his violet sun sword had both borrowed the sword intent of the coagulated sword. And the effect was very good. At this moment, Qin Wushuang had no time to comprehend the mysteries of the move. He waved the hegemon breaking formation spear in his hand and his body rose into the air, quickly rushing up the mountain path. The woodcutter's sharp whistle immediately alerted the group of people entrenched on the Tortoise King Mountain. They kept pouring in from all directions. Qin Wushuang opened his eyes and looked around. He was not worried. It could be seen that although there were many of them, their cultivation was not enough to threaten Qin Wushuang. At least, these people did not have the ability to fly. In other words, they were at most at the refined void martial stage. For Qin Wushuang, although he had just entered the refined void martial stage, he was no longer under the control of powerful warriors of the refined void martial stage. Even if he did not use the graceful spiritual bow, he was confident that he could deal with these people. Where did this guy come from? Don't he know that the Tortoise King Mountain has been occupied by us? Since you're here, don't leave. Each of these people scuttled out from different corners of the mountain and rushed towards Qin Wushuang's direction. Of course, Qin Wushuang would not rush into battle. Instead, he hid himself in the dark and observed the background of these people. More than 10 cultivators gathered around the mountain path and looked around. They were obviously looking for Qin Wushuang's whereabouts. Didn't 8th brother warn us just now? Where's 8th brother? Oh no, look over there. That's 8th brother. Has he been killed? The voices rose and fell one after another. It was a bit noisy. Let's go and inform Big Brother and Second Brother. A powerful enemy must have come. Yes, Third Brother. Let's go and inform Big Brother and Second Brother. Seeing their companion's corpse on the spot, these cultivators were obviously somewhat worried. They did not understand what was going on. This group of people was appointed by their superiors to occupy the Tortoise King Mountain. They were originally unwilling, but they had no choice but to carry out the orders from their superiors. Qin Wushuang avoided the eyes and ears of these people, and shuttled all the way. In a short moment, he arrived at the back of the giant tortoise. This Tortoise King Mountain was indeed like a giant tortoise. Even the top of the mountain was like the back of a tortoise, with pieces of tortoise shell. However, if one did not look at the shape of these pieces from a high place, one would not be able to see them. Just as Qin Wushuang was walking, suddenly, a figure pierced out from the sky. With a trembling light, a wave of awe-inspiring sword chi slashed at Qin Wushuang. This sword attack that came out of nowhere was very sudden. Fortunately, Qin Wushuang was not someone who was easy to deal with. He had been concentrating all his attention. The Overlord breaking formation spear blocked and took advantage of the momentum to move forward. The spear light was urged by Qin Wushuang and directly shot out from the tip of the spear, thrusting 3 times in a row. These 3 spear lights directly shattered the slanted beam of light that had pierced out. As the ball of light scattered, a figure flew up and circled in the air. Facing the wind, he quickly slashed down with his sword. Qin Wushuang saw that he could fly so freely in the air and knew that he was undoubtedly a transformation void martial stage expert. He was not afraid at the moment. Pointing the tip of the spear upwards, he continuously stabbed. 2-2-2, one spear strike after another, forming an icicle-like sharp attack that greeted the figure in the air. Almost at the same time, Qin Wushuang's left hand shook. The Fury Dragon's soul rolled like a poisonous snake, bringing out streams of black chi that formed circle after circle of ripples that quickly spread to the opposite side. 2 hands, 2 weapons actually used different moves to attack at the same time. Such an unimaginable attack made the other party dumbstruck. It was simply beyond his imagination. His body rapidly retreated, leaving afterimages in the air as he quickly flew back. This person asked in a hoarse voice, "Who are you?" Qin Wushuang sneered, "And who are you?" This person sneakily attacked him. Obviously, he was not a friend. Under such circumstances, Qin Wushuang would not be polite. Following the direction of the person's retreat, he held the Overlord breaking formation spear horizontally and rushed forward with his whole body. Taking advantage of this speed, he raised the long spear in his hand. Boom! As the long spear moved, the surrounding ground suddenly split on both sides. A whirlwind like a long dragon rolled up in the air and wrapped up all the afterimages of that person with unparalleled speed and momentum. Deep core move. This was Qin Wushuang's self-created spear technique, the third move, deep core. This time, Qin Wushuang did not perform the water attribute or the fire attribute. Instead, he performed the earth attribute. With the mystery of the earth's pulse, he formed a kind of magnetic field similar to the earth's vein to control the speed and direction of the opponent's flight, which was a fatal blow. At this time, Qin Wushuang's advantage of being baptized by the divine light suddenly became obvious. The opponent could not believe it. Judging from Qin Wushuang's attack pattern and fighting style, he thought that Qin Wushuang was only at the voiding realm. Although the attack of this voiding realm was very powerful, that was all. However, Qin Wushuang's endless attack skills made this strong master of the voiding realm feel difficult to resist. He quickly retreated, already knowing that things were not going well. Risking being hit by Qin Wushuang's attack, this person quickly soared into the air like a rising dragon. Obviously, he intended to use the advantage of the air to deal a fatal blow to Qin Wushuang. Boom! Qin Wushuang's deep core move hit that person's back. The yellow light suddenly surged and a huge force directly blasted that person into the sky. That person felt his chi and blood tumbling and almost couldn't control himself. He barely stabilized his body and didn't let himself fall from the air. The attack of the voiding realm injured him directly and damaged his vital spirit. This person furiously roared in the air, "Boss, come out quickly, there's a tough one." Qin Wushuang saw clearly that the graceful spiritual bow was already drawn. Whoosh! There was no suspense at all in this arrow as it flew straight into the air. The speed was so fast and the momentum was so strong that the opponent didn't even have time to react. The green light flashed, and there was a burst of explosion in the air. The light scattered and shot in all directions. A rain of blood fell in all directions. That person was completely killed by Qin Wushuang. Qin Wushuang waved his arm, and the green light returned. That green arrow returned to Qin Wushuang's hand. If you want to know what happened next, please go to www.chidian.com to read more chapters. Support the author, support the original reading. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.